everybody, welcome to the Pro Wrestling Musings podcast. I am Griff from GA, and I am now going to have to do more introductions than I've ever done on an episode of the Pro Wrestling Musings podcast. But that's okay, because we're dealing with a very unique situation. Right over there, that is Craig, the creator, the god of all stats, the lord of... I forgot the rest of what I was supposed to say about Craig. He's a really smart dude, and he deals with wrestling stats. That's all you need to know. Right down there, that is Sergi from PWM. Of course, he is the guru behind Styles Make Fights, and you can bet that we'll be talking about that today. And right down there in the corner, this is a hard one to do. That is Gareth, the guru. No, I already used guru. He's the guy who puts together the Pro Wrestling Musings Roundtable. We have the absolute best people to talk about one of the absolute best wrestling shows that we have seen in I don't know how long. I'm sure we'll get into that. AEW Grand Slam. And we will begin, of course, with Bryan Danielson versus Kenny Omega. The dream match that everyone wanted. We finally got it. Did it live up to expectations? Did it leave us wanting more? Because it may very well be the case that we will get more. We have the numbers to break this all down. So we'll start with Craig, the man who put together the numbers. Craig, just your initial thoughts on this match. How good was it? Did you like it? Would you like to see it again?
Yes, I would like to see it again. I think we were like 20 minutes in. I was kind of coming to the realization, oh, this has been going on for quite a long time for a wrestling match. There's perhaps not that long left. And I could watch this for a significant amount of time longer. So yes, yes, and yes again.
You know what? I totally agree with you on that one. So here's the cool thing about Danielson and Omega, and we'll get into all of the different discussion and talk about it, but here's what I think is really cool about it, is that these two guys, they knew the expectations that were placed on them, right? They knew that they were coming out there and they were going to have to deliver an Omega versus Danielson match. And for some guys, they start to overthink themselves, right? In traditional sports, when coaches do that, you just call it a coach outthinking himself, right? And he's thinking, okay, so I need to do this and this and this and be unexpected and all this because, people are expecting greatness. And I think these two guys just came out there and said, people are expecting greatness because we are great wrestlers. So let's just go out and do what we normally do. That's what people want to see. And I think they were absolutely right. We just wanted to see Kenny Omega and Bryan Danielson being Kenny Omega and Bryan Danielson. Gareth, take us through this match. Take us through, I don't want to tell you to go minute by minute, but take us through your thought process as this match went on. Did you actually start to enjoy it more as the match went on?
Yeah, I was going to say it's a weird one, but only because leading into the match, I was really trying to temper my expectations because I wanted, like everyone really, this to be one of the best matches of the year, if not ever. As they're the expectations that it kind of demands, but I didn't want to go overboard. And then as we were starting the match, we had this feeling out process, which was really good, kind of trying to one up each other. There was a great spot where they did their the Greco-Roman wrestling. I forget exactly what it's called.
The Greco-Roman knuckle lock.
Greco-Roman.
That's it. Yeah.
Yep.
And Omega usually a heel would like kind of tease it and then you just kick him or something. And Omega's done that quite a few times. But here, like, it's the whole story of this is just proving who's better. And even Omega, like, Don Callis at ringside, he hardly did anything apart from scream at people in the crowd. And so, like, that was really great to see because it was kind of like, as great as Omega's character is right now. And this match was still completely informed by his character and stuff. It's not like he just decided to forget that for one night. But he did kind of like, rather than do kind of the heel shtick he's done, he kind of adapted it to be more in line with this story of these two guys being the two best in the world, trying to prove who is the best. So I really liked that opening sequence. And then from there, like, it was kind of like a back and forth. Like, Bryan would have a bit of time, and then Omega would have a bit of time. And then we obviously get to that spot where Omega hits the dragon suplex and then the V-trigger on the outside in the like ramp area. And then Bryan's just dead for... I'm assuming that's the point, because I haven't actually gone through this match fully yet, like in terms of breaking it down with the time by time. But like I'm assuming there's a good 5 minute period where Brian gets no offense, and I'm assuming it's
6,
that.
yeah.
Yeah, six.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's 6 minutes. Yeah, it's like all
Mhm.
the ramp stuff, and then they immediately go to break, I believe, after that. So
Yeah,
just like during the break, it's all Omega, and Brian doesn't get anything until he reverses that little struggle on the top rope, and
yeah.
he does something from the top rope that I cannot remember. Is it just, does he do the dragon suplex from the top rope, or does Omega do that later?
Omega
I
does
think
the
it's
dragon suplex from the top, but that's later in the match.
yeah.
I
Okay,
think
so
Um,
Brian does something to Omega from the top.
I think he hits a knee
yeah.
from the top, if I remember correctly. Um,
Ah,
I forget exactly, but yeah, you've got
yeah.
that period which kind of just completely changes the flow of the match, and then from there until the end, it's just again when Brian makes his comeback, it's again a bit of a back and forth, and then towards the end, Brian really looks in control, and then the bell goes, and I was kind of happy because I was like, well, I know we're getting a rematch sooner rather than later because why would you do this otherwise? And I was kind
right.
of sad because I was just like, I just want to watch another half an hour of this. But yeah, it was great. It was great. As my literal one dream match above all,
Hmm.
um, one that I know that they can and most likely will improve upon as well. It was basically everything I could have hoped for.
Yeah, that was the biggest thing for me watching it and saying, this is an incredible match, and I know that these guys are capable of doing more. Like you could tell within the first 5 minutes that this was designed to see how well the fans would react to this, and them saying, let's go about 50% and just tease the fact that there's a lot more that we can get out of this. And I think this is going the sort of traditional route of them saying, what we're going to do is we're going to show you how much you want this match, and then we're going to make you pay for it. And I'm just like, okay. Tell me that you're giving me an Iron Man match and that you're going to charge $120 for it. I'll watch that. I'm making the down payment on that. I'll sell my car, whatever I need to do to watch this rematch happen. Sergi, you are our styles make fights guy. You deal with fighting styles as your whole gimmick on Pro Wrestling Musings. It's not a gimmick, it's a lifestyle for Sergi
Thank
talking
you.
about fighting styles. So obviously we have so much of a sample size for Kenny Omega. He's fought more than almost anyone in
And vice versa.
AEW. Right.
The opposite with Brian Danielson.
Exactly. You have
Yeah.
nothing to go with for Danielson. So specifically for Danielson, but for Omega as well, how did the styles for Danielson compare to what you thought was going to happen? And for Omega, how did his style compare to what he usually does in matches like this?
Well, the thing that I've really noticed with Kenny Omega, especially since the feud with Christian Cage, is that he has a very consistent style, a consistent mix of offense with most everybody. There's certain things he does, um, but if he is trying to, outside of kayfabe, we would say if he is trying to depict that he is intimidated by someone, if he's trying to sell that they're a threat, that he feels that they're a threat, he will back off of something that he normally does to show that he's scared of their finisher, scared of something that they could do to beat him. For Christian Cage, that was grapples. In Christian Cage versus Omega 1, he used hardly any grapples or submissions. In the second one, where he beat him, he brought the submissions back, but he still avoided the grapples. And it's my theory that that was intended to sell the kill switch. It's intended to show his wariness of Christian Cage's finishing move. He didn't want to get into any of those situations because he knows Christian Cage's ability to reverse a grapple move into the kill switch, all kinds of them. And my prediction in the Styles Make Fights column, it's slightly moot now, but please go read it because I was right. My prediction was that he would do the same thing with submission moves against Bryan Danielson out of fear of the LeBell Lock, and that is exactly what we see. If you take all of if you take Kenny Omega's matches and subtract out the 2 non-wins, the loss to Christian Cage and the draw just now, his average per hour rate of seconds of submission is 120. So 2 minutes of per hour, he has someone in a submission hold. And for this match, it went down to, let's look at the very end of this. It's going to have all of the per hour ones. It went all the way down to 16. From 120 to 16 seconds per hour, which means just doubling since it was a half-hour match exactly. He had 8 seconds of submission, so 16 seconds per hour, all the way from the 120, which is what he's used to. Notably, Danielson was very close to the same submission rate that Omega usually has. He was 114 seconds of submissions per hour. So yeah, you're looking at that would be 57 seconds that he did in that match. And if you double it to make it a per hour rate, 114 compared to Omega's usual of 120. So you've got Danielson, the submission specialist, and Omega completely ceding the field to him in that area, which is interesting because, as Gareth was pointing out, Omega was willing to do a lot of things that he normally would be like, I'm too smart for that, like the test of strength that jokingly people call the Greco-Roman knuckle lock. The test of strength, he was willing to actually play the game to try to get one up, to try to have a little bit of anything you can do, I can do better. But when it came to submissions, no, he's not. There are a lot of wrestlers, usually when they're working as babyface, and I bet Kenny Omega working as babyface would do the same, that whatever your specialty is, I want to prove, at least on some level, that I can hang with you there. Omega does the opposite of that. He absolutely is the character who says, you know, if you're fantastic at something, I want to take you away from that game as much as I can. And Omega completely avoided submissions in this match, and I think that's the big story in terms of styles.
One of the things that I think really came through about this match, and this is just for me personally, everyone has their own opinion on this particular issue, but for me, I realized that Kenny Omega, if you were to just chart out the top 5 matches in AEW, I think, for me personally, Kenny Omega may very well be involved in all 5 of them. Like, I haven't thought about specifically what they are, but just off the top of my head, to think about this match, his match with Phoenix, Omega and Page versus FTR, Omega and Page versus the Bucks, like Omega versus Moxley, Lights Out, Omega versus Pac, Iron Man, like, just off the top of my head, some of my favorite matches in AEW, almost all of them are involving Kenny Omega. And I just don't know what other wrestler can claim that. I understand that AEW is young, but Kenny Omega has defined AEW's match quality, you know, in large part, both in the singles and in tag. And that's just my opinion. But one of the reasons that I think that's the case is when you look at something like this. I want to show you the graph of this match. And you all know, if you've listened to the Pro Wrestling Musings podcast before, you know that the graph is one of my favorite things to look at. And this is the reason why, because you can see the storytelling happen on just a minute by minute period. And I'm glad that Craig has shifted to going minute by minute with this, because it lets you really see how these guys work. Now, for me, great wrestling simulates great fighting, right? It sounds obvious, but I think one of the things that really makes wrestling good is when you see a fight play out in front of your eyes. And a fight involves people reacting to each other. It involves tactics. It involves people making minute adjustments when they realize that, oh, this thing that I'm doing, it doesn't work, or this thing that I'm doing does work, so let me continue with it. That's what a great fight is about. When you watch a great boxing match, that's what they do. That's what the great fighters do. That's exactly what you see in this match, and it mirrors exactly what you see in Omega's matches with Okada. They look very similar to this. What it looks like is the graph lines almost mirroring each other, that as Bryan's offense goes up, Omega's goes down. And then when Omega figures out something that he needs to do, his offense goes up and Bryan's goes down, right? And you just continue to get this sort of interplay between the two where they're figuring out something that works, and then the other guy figures out something to counter it. And then what's really interesting, right at 20 minutes, the offense hits 0. And what you see is after 20 minutes, I think that's very intentional, because after 20 minutes, that's when most AEW non-title matches would have gone to a draw. So for most people, they sell out everything in 20 minutes. Not so for these guys, because then it picks up immediately, and then Omega's goes up, and then it goes back down, and then Bryan Danielson goes up, and then it goes back down, and then right at the end, you get, again, 28 minutes. They're both at 0. No offense for those guys happens at that 28-minute mark, and then Danielson shoots up. So for 2 minutes, he's saying, now I have to win this match. Now I understand that I have to win this match. I think it's just masterful storytelling on the part of these two guys, because there's such a realization that, again, from a non-kayfabe perspective, they know that people are expecting the world from these guys, and they know that all they have to do is go and be themselves to deliver. And then from a kayfabe perspective, you are getting the 20-minute mark and they're spent, but they continue to go on. You're getting the 28-minute mark and they're spent, but they continue to go on. Both from a kayfabe and non-kayfabe perspective, what we saw in this match was the two best wrestlers in AEW, maybe the two best wrestlers in the world, and they proved not only how good they are physically, but how good they are in storytelling, and how good their chemistry really is. And to me, that is what lasts out of this match, and it's why I think so many people want to see this match again, because you just saw the chemistry between these two guys, and you know that even then, they still have more to deliver than what we saw in 30 minutes, which is just unbelievable. It just speaks to the quality of these two guys. Let me shift gears slightly, and Craig, let me ask you this: what was the biggest numerical standout from this? What is the number that you tracked that most made you step back and say, "Wow, that is not something I was expecting to see from this match"?
The obvious one is the match offense. And for any Americans out there, yes, that is how you spell it in Britain. Please stop insulting me on Reddit about it. It's very tiresome. Anyway, so yeah, the match offense. Brian Danielson, apologies, has almost double what Kenny Omega has. But then when we look at the big offense, it's that thing again. When you take away all those simple strikes, you can see that Daniel Bryan has 74 strikes, but only 5 of them result in strike down. Again, strike down was just something that I used instead of knockdown because I kind of wanted to make it my own. Sometimes strike downs, when I think of a knockdown, it would be like a guy flat on his back in boxing, whereas a strike down, in wrestling, it's, I don't know, it feels a bit different. Anyway, so yeah, Omega has more big offense, and as you can see, that's driven mainly by strike downs and grapples. This is more of a kind of a spread of offense that you would imagine you'd get from Kenny Omega. He's been thrown in more dives into this match, and less submissions, as Sergio was just saying. During this heel run, Kenny Omega hasn't always been doing very many dives, if at all. I think he did one against Christian Cage, and then like against guys like Jungle Boy and Phoenix, he's just not doing it, which is something that he does as a heel, even when he was a face way back in 2019, when he went to Mexico and he took the title, the AAA title. He wrestled in this manner. It was grapple heavy and 0 dives. So he's kind of gone back to more to his roots perhaps here, or his babyface style, or he's answered Bryan Danielson's challenge of give me the best bout machine. I Gareth sent out a really good tweet the other day saying don't expect Okada Omega from this match. Part of the magic of this match was the stage, when they locked eyes at the beginning. The crowd were, the crowd were spellbound. They were absolutely enthralled at being here. They were going crazy before anything had happened. The first 60 seconds of this match was nothing. They were just staring at each other. And as soon as they kind of locked up, touched, the crowd went crazy again. So that's part of why this match is special, other than it was just really good professional wrestling done really well by two really good wrestlers. Apart from the bits from Omega on the ramp, I wouldn't say any of this was like genre breaking or anything, not in the same way that the Okada Omega matches were. And when Gareth sent out his tweet, I thought, well, yeah, that's a good point. I would be hoping for something like the Page Omega match from Full Gear 2020, which again, it was a match where they left things on the table, but it was a really excellent, tight, well put together match.
Right. Just
like this one, it was. I would say that this one took it slightly to the next level.
Yeah.
In terms of stats, Omega's still doing loads of taunts. Bryan Danielson was the one that brought fouls into it first, using the ring post at the beginning. So, he was playing dirty too. Maybe that's a character shift. Almost a whole minute of submission from Danielson. Danielson outdid Omega in simple strikes and submission and dives. Omega outdid Danielson in strike downs and grapples.
One of the things that I think is I keep saying that just because every minute we talk about this, I feel like there's more and more things I find interesting looking at the stats and looking at the graphs and everything else. And if you're in the chat, by the way, let us know, first of all, if you have any questions about what any of these things are and how we track them, but also what you found interesting looking at this. If this is your first time looking at wrestling statistics, it's something that you almost have to train your brain for a little bit, just to understand what am I looking at and how does it support the story that they were telling. And that's really the biggest thing about wrestling stats, is understanding that these numbers help us visualize the physical story that's being told. And certainly the thing that jumps off the page, one of the biggest disparities, besides just the simple strikes, is the taunts from Omega. 21 taunts from Kenny Omega. Now that is interesting if you have looked at the numbers from Omega Okada. And I know that this match was different than that, but in the sense of that was the last time that we saw Omega take on a wrestler the level of Bryan Danielson. I think the closest that we've seen to the wrestling ability that Okada has. And in those matches, Omega actually tends to taunt less. And I think that is actually something that is emblematic of Kenny Omega as a character, that when he is intimidated, when he knows that he can't just, bring his C game, he has to be on his A game, he tends to taunt less. Like it's a reminder to himself that, the man across from him, he actually has to take seriously. But what's interesting is that in this one, he didn't. He still taunted as much as he always does. And I think that could be one of two things. Either it's Omega being so arrogant that he doesn't think Bryan Danielson is on his level. I don't think that's the one. What I think it actually is Kenny Omega as a character actually trying to psych himself up, that Kenny Omega actually believes that not only is Bryan Danielson on his level, Bryan Danielson might actually be on a different level right now than Kenny Omega is. And so he's actually trying to get himself psyched up. And those taunts are really for him, not for Bryan Danielson. Now, from a non-kayfabe perspective, I think it's pretty clear, what he's doing is he wants to get the crowd involved, right? And that's the other thing, is that Omega knows, he's so smart that he understands, okay, I know that we're about to go 30 minutes. So there's little things that I have to do to keep this crowd invested. And, he doesn't have to do big things. They don't need massive spots. It's just those little things to get to continue to keep the crowd interested and understand that, yes, we're fighting in front of 20,000 people. I can't just expect that for 30 minutes they're going to be on their feet the whole time. there's little things that I have to do to keep them invested. And it's just one of those little things that, it certainly kept me invested and kept those 20,000 people totally involved in that match. Sergi might be on mute here. He's trying to. Let me.
Is.
Yeah. Let me.
The other thing about the taunts that I'll just quickly mention, during that bit of the match, that again I think it was Gareth that was talking about earlier, the 6 or so minutes where Omega was in control. A lot of that was during the break.
Mm-hmm.
During that kind of 6 minute spell where Omega had Danielson kind of down and very much in control, out of the 21 taunts, there were 10 of his 21 taunts, so almost exactly half of his taunts came in that like 6 minute period where he had Danielson down and kind of out. So he did 10 taunts in that period. He used, hold on, I'm realizing this as I'm talking, 4, 6, 10. He did 10 offensive maneuvers, so he did as many taunts as actual maneuvers during that bit where Bryan Danielson was like completely out. From a kayfabe point of view, Omega probably, he up until that point he was wrestling more best bout machine, bit more kind of taking it seriously. It feels like maybe at that part of the match something switched in his head. I've got this, everything's in control, strategy's out the window, I'm gonna mess around. And then of course the non-kayfabe way of looking at it is he's taunting instead of doing wrestling, so to not give the good stuff away in picture-in-picture if you're watching on TNT.
That's a good point. Oh, Sergi, this is disappointing. This is disappointing from Sergi. Look, I think that while Sergi figures out his mic issue, because I do want to hear from him, I want to draw some attention here to the one chart that we haven't yet talked about. And that is the cumulative flow of offense here. The reason why this is interesting in a match like this is because it really shows not so much how the guys responded to each other, but it shows the pacing. And in a 30-minute match, the pacing is so important. How these guys, how they plan their match around the length of time that they know they're about to go. And these guys have some of the best cardio in the world, in my opinion. But you still, when you're wrestling 30 minutes, you still have to be able to go, that length of time without a noticeable slowdown at some point. And I think the cumulative flow of offense really shows you that in that time that encompasses the break, like you said, Craig, you can see that Danielson's offense doesn't move at all. And Omega, it doesn't shoot up like you'd sort of expect it to. He still is pacing himself. Now, a big part of that, like you said, Craig, is doing a lot of taunts and sort of saving himself while they're in a TV break. But it's still, from a kayfabe perspective, it's Omega realizing that, even though I might have Danielson down, that doesn't mean that I can just spend myself here, because I know that this guy eventually is going to get back up, and that's exactly what he did. What you see is not a consistent straight line going up. What you see is a lot of ebbs and flows in the way that these two guys pace each other. And I think from a tactical perspective, again, if we're going to bring it back to tactically, a fight is supposed to be about reacting to each other. And you can see that these guys are almost reacting ahead of time. Like, if you look at this, Omega starts to speed up when Danielson, like a minute or two before Danielson starts to speed up. Like, these two guys, they're like chess players. They see 2 or 3 moves ahead, and they understand, okay, here's what Danielson's about to do. Omega's thinking, here's what Danielson's about to do. So I know that I'm going to have to do something to counter this. And you can see that he's sort of building himself up. I'm looking at, the 22 to 26 minutes that Omega starts to build himself up, and then Danielson stops, and that's when Omega goes up. But then Danielson realizes, all right, I got to get myself back on track. And then again, there's that point at 28 minutes where they have no offense again, where they've just completely spent themselves. But then Danielson wakes up. Danielson says, "I got to go get this win." I think. Yeah,
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, so sorry. I don't know what was going on with my mic. All right.
No worries.
So what I was gonna say about the taunts is that another perspective on him using the taunts, besides firing himself up, is an attempt to basically make it seem like he is more confident than he is to Danielson. But then what Craig said kind of changed my mind on that a little bit. Of it sounds like specifically a lot of the taunts were intended to depict overconfidence, in moments where he felt like he had it in the bag.
Interesting.
And another thing that you guys were talking about a little bit ago about the pace and about like at 20 minutes that the offense stopped briefly, and it just was like that was the point at which a match would normally have ended, etc. One thing that's really interesting about this match to me is that it never felt long. They weren't playing the story, which is common with the Broadway, of these men are exhausted. It's a story of their endurance, where both guys are on the mat and they're struggling to even commit to any offense to each other because they're too blown up, or they're too destroyed by the other guy's offense previously, that they can't even, he can't even capitalize. Nobody said the phrase "he can't even capitalize" on that. Or the other thing that's real common in a Broadway, this is insider term for anybody who's listening who doesn't know, that's a term for a draw, a time limit draw. Another thing that's real common is like in the case of like Cody versus Darby Allin, where they'll tell the story of frustration, of people being very aware of the time limit coming closer and closer, and like I've only got so much time to. In this match, it just snuck up on us. They didn't mention it much on commentary. The warnings by the ring announcer weren't as noticeable as they often are. I think a lot of people missed them. And the ending, the fact that you were that close to the ending, that there was like a 1 minute warning, is just like, what? It really stuck up on you in a way that made you, that I think was intended to put over the idea that this is a match. This is a matchup that we could watch even longer than this. This is a matchup that if like you were saying, if they were to sell us this Rampage a few weeks down the road, just one match, that people would be like, yep, I'm there,
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting that you brought that up.
Do
because
you think?
No, go ahead, Greg.
Is that a good thing though? Is that a good thing that they didn't? I've seen some pushback against that online, and I have to admit, when I was watching, I was thinking, is this going to be a draw? I thought it was, but the fact that they hadn't been signposting the time, kind of, and the timestamps, that's the best phrase I've got at the moment.
Yeah.
Like in Japan or in AEW in other matches previously, the tension kind of ramps up by saying, you get 10 minutes. In AEW, they usually highlight 10 minutes and then 15, 20 if it's going that long.
Yeah.
So you would expect to get your 5 minute marks in this length of match. You do in Japan, and after the 5 minute marks, as you get closer to 30, they would tend to do then 3, 2, and 1. And what it does is it really ramps up the tension. Like the crowd hears it, and the crowd start to get whipped up. I felt like that didn't really happen here, and it was kind of, as Sergi said, it kind of snuck up on people.
Yeah.
Whether or not that was deliberate, I don't know. It must have been deliberate,
Mhm.
but
Mhm.
I'm not convinced. I don't know. I don't know. I think it maybe slightly took something from the match.
In a way, I mean,
Yeah.
if you were looking for that drama, I can understand being like, oh, hey, why didn't they do that? But I feel like it was intentional, and that just the drama of I can't put this guy away wasn't the story they were trying to tell. Whereas they were trying to tell the story of this is a matchup that that wrestling fans could enjoyably watch for not just a half hour, but even longer. This could go on so long and still be fun.
Mhm.
And next time, just imagine what you're gonna get.
Sure,
This is a
sure.
Yeah.
teaser. It was
Yeah.
intended as a teaser. Whereas,
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
Cody versus Darby Allin was telling the story of Cody's frustration. That was the story of
Mm.
the match. I
Yeah.
mean, their first matchup, of course, the one that ended in a draw.
Yeah, no, I see both of your points. I think I generally like consistency, so I would have preferred that they had given the timestamps because I agree with you, Craig. What I was kind of expecting was they would give at least a 5 minute and then a 1 minute, and so the fans would start to understand. Here's how much time we have left, and are we actually going to see a draw? So I would have preferred that. I don't think it took away from the match in any significant way. The only thing I think it did was take it made the finish slightly less climactic just because I didn't know how much time they had left. So I would have preferred that I knew we're running up against time here and these guys like they're just going at it and it starts to dawn on me that we're gonna get a draw here. I think that's the only thing. I don't think it took away from the match in any significant way, but I would have preferred that it was in there. Garrett, I'm going to give you the last word on this one before we move on because it turns out there was a whole other 2-hour show besides just Omega and Danielson. We've been talking about this for longer than the match actually went on. So I'm going to give you the last word here. I know that Bryan Danielson, if I remember correctly, is your favorite wrestler of all time. So
Yeah.
I got to ask you, in a vacuum, forgetting the fact that we may very well get this again in the main event of Full Gear, in a vacuum, how does this compare to your expectations, and how does this compare to some of the best matches that you've ever seen?
Earth's
Um,
been sitting there quietly. He's definitely been like watching it again on mute.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I wouldn't watch that match on mute. No point. But yeah, no. In terms of my expectations and stuff, like I said earlier, I dampened them purposefully because I knew the limits of TV and stuff were gonna mean this was never gonna be as good as it possibly could be. But even then, it was above what I was expecting. Going into the show, we weren't sure, or at least going into the night. I think they announced on the pre-show, which I didn't watch, that it was
Mhm.
30-minute time limit and that it was opening the show and stuff. But going into the night, we didn't know what the time limit was, so I wasn't sure if it was going to be 20 or 30, which immediately, if it's 30, that's a whole other 10 minutes,
Mhm.
and it's a completely different match then. So
Yep.
it was
Yep.
hard to even know what to expect. But from the time I heard it was going to be 30, immediately then I was thinking, because a lot of people thought this was going to be a draw. Immediately then I was thinking it was less likely. So I'm glad of that it wasn't like a 20-minute match. Because if I'd heard 20-minute time limit, I would have immediately assumed a draw.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, in terms of like my expectations, it was above what I'd set myself up for, but I had purposefully dampened it. I would say this is basically as good as you could have realistically expected it to have been within the framework of what were working with.
Yeah.
Again, like Sergio said earlier, this was basically a teaser for a bigger match between the two. So that's what's gonna be a potential all-timer. This was definitely a match of the year contender. Um, I I have to let it simmer a bit longer before I say exactly where I put it. But yeah, in
Mhm.
terms of like Bryan Danielson as well, it's well, in terms of Kenny Omega, it's my favorite match he's had in AEW. In terms of Bryan Danielson, it's ranked higher than on Cage Match than any of his WWE matches, and I would probably say that's accurate. Um, You know, he had some absolute classics, and it's a different style ultimately. Like
Right.
this was much more. You said earlier it was there are elements to this match which are similar to Okada and versus Omega, and this was more in that kind of on the spectrum of WWE to New Japan. This is closer to that New Japan style with the
Yeah.
the hard strikes and all that, and just the way the match was structured, than it was sports entertainment, so to
Yeah.
say. But yeah, you also were talking about earlier just the way in which the tactics were kind of going back and forth as they would in a sport, for example, and that flow of offense chart, the community. I can't say that word. I can say it. I know I can, but it's just one of those things. Cumulative. Anyway, I can read, but
We believe you.
but yeah, that chart's really interesting because like Brian kind of peels ahead quite a bit, and then Omega comes back, and to me it's like, especially with that story of who's the better wrestler and all that thing. Brian's constantly the one kind of setting the bar, and then Omega comes back, and then Brian's reacts then and comes back, and that's
Yep.
basically what storytelling is like. As it is the same with like wrestling is sports combined with storytelling. So that the tactics of people reacting to each other goes in line with the storytelling is basically cause and effect. So this is probably a chart which shows it more than anything because you can literally see them reacting to each other. Brian peeling ahead, and they're telling that story that Brian's maybe just that level above Omega, especially with the finish or what happened after the bell, with Brian locking the bell lock, and Excalibur saying if this went another minute, maybe Brian gets the win.
Yeah.
Like so, they're very much going for that thing of like Brian very realistically could beat Kenny Omega. He's one of the few that
Right.
could do it. And yeah, they told that story perfectly. But like you were saying earlier, that just goes so perfectly in line with sports and the whole tactics side of things. So
Yep.
it's
Yep.
just an absolute masterclass, I think, and from a storytelling perspective, and a great match. So
Yep.
yeah,
Yep.
that
At the
kind
end
of
of the
answers your
day,
question.
at the end of the day, that's all you can say about it. It was a great match. Now, I did promise you the last word, but unfortunately, I was lying. Joe from our chat gets the last word. When going back to our discussion earlier, and I think it really encapsulates the whole match, where he says that he liked that they didn't focus on the time and that they kept going after the bell. Again, it just goes into that storytelling aspect of it, that that there's something else that is coming out of this match, and them going after the bell, locking into the bell lock. And he said, one of the unique things is they didn't do the whole lock in the submission and then Omega taps out right after the time limit, which honestly is kind of what I was hoping for. But yeah, I mean, it's a cliche. I kind of like it, but I agree with Joe that the storytelling is the important part, and they certainly did that. So when we see this rematch, that I think will be the culmination of the story, and that is going to be where these guys say, nope, it's not about story. Now this is about giving you the best possible match that you can get between Kenny Omega and Bryan Danielson. And if it's better than this, then I think we're in for something special.
Yeah, that's a really excellent point. That the way that they finished this, absolutely, it reinforces what I was saying before about what story they were telling with the time limit draw, which a lot of times that's the story of I could have beaten him if I'd had only 2 more minutes. But instead, here they're telling the story of we're at a half an hour and we're still just battling. We're nowhere near an end. And that's the story they want to tell of, to psych us up for just how great the next one will be. As opposed to, he could have beaten him if only, as the story that they would have been telling if they had done, the typical, the time limit draw expired just as he was about to win. It's like, no, they weren't. They had miles to go.
Yeah. No, that's a fantastic point. I'm glad you brought that up. I'm trying to move on from this match because there was 2 more hours of wrestling, but we keep
tough.
going back, and now we have in the chat, we got Immortal Vegan, which, by the way, that's a cool name. I'm not a vegan myself, but maybe I should be if your name is accurate. asking the question I think a lot of people have been taking on. So I want you guys to quickly weigh in on this. Asking the question, what do you make of the folks that say this match shouldn't have been given away for free on TV? Craig, I'll let you tackle that first.
So I'm I get the question, and wrestling is one of these things that's like very, very, very capitalist. I'm a bit fed up of JR talking about money and the pay window on commentary. Um, I understand that maybe it seems like it's not good business. I suppose it maybe goes back to like this is a taster. So you get your taster, and then when people are addicted, you ramp the price right on up. Um, yeah. So yeah, I do get it. I think I think that is people being critical and trying to. It feels like it's slightly starting to step on the line of like AEW's done a really good thing again. How do we add just a little bit of urine to their cornflakes?
I think I'll play devil's advocate here before I go to Gareth for his answer, because I think what you're saying is legitimate, and I think there are some bad faith actors that will just say that because it's some way to be critical. I think the one thing you could say is we know how big this match was, and so it would follow logically that more people would pay for it if it's the first time they've ever seen it. I think that's the thought process. I don't necessarily agree because of how well these guys, like Sergi was saying, like all of us have been saying, but Sergi said it most recently, because of how these guys structured their match, they left a lot out there. So I think it's legitimate to say beforehand, why are you giving me this match for free when I've never seen it before? But knowing what we know after the match, I think these guys did a phenomenal job of leaving a lot. They didn't leave everything in the ring. They took a lot with them so that when I pay for this match, now I'm even more intrigued. I was going to pay for it either way, but now I'm even more intrigued because I know that they have even more than this to give me when I actually plunk down my $50 to pay for full gear and presumably watch this rematch.
I suppose the other thing to say is it's not for free. Like people are paying for cable, and you have your advertisements, and when you look at WWE, these are billion-dollar TV deals. So I suppose by putting this on television, AEW are putting their best match out in front where the most people are going to see it, and potentially add to their momentum and add to their numbers, and so potentially it's like it's possibly even more business savvy and long-term thinking to put a taster like this on television. I'm not sure how. I don't know enough about the numbers, and I don't know how valuable pay-per-view is. I was thinking while I was watching this 2-hour show, I prefer this. I don't need 4 or 5 hours. Like that's too much for I'm 30 years old. I've got a busy job and a kid, so maybe I'm very, very different. But like I prefer almost like the series finale of like you work towards Grand Slam, or I think what was more of a destination they worked towards on TV, and I think it's probably because the gap between pay-per-views was at the end of 2020 with Winter's Coming. I like and there's absolutely no reason why you can't just do that with a pay-per-view, and they do. But yeah, I kind of like I'm not against the journey and the finale being on TV.
Yep. I would agree with that. I think you bring up a good point, by the way. Immortal Vegan weighing in again, saying that they think they're building the TV portfolio with this match, which I would agree with. I feel like they are as well. Leon of the New Geeks, which I recognize that name. I think he was a recent commenter on one of our videos, so I appreciate that. But they agree There's literally nothing wrong with the first match being on TV. They gained a lot of momentum by doing this, which again, I absolutely agree with. Craig, I think, brought up a really good point. The business of wrestling may very well be changing because of how valuable these TV deals are getting. We see it in traditional sports as well, that the rights fees to air these sports are getting so high that it's literally changing the business model. And I think for wrestling, that is the case, that you have so many eyes on your TV product and the rights deals are so big that it almost feels like who buys the pay-per-view, it's not sold on your main event match anymore. You know, you're not what you're going for is not, you know, people paying for the pay-per-view because, you know, you're giving them a huge match that they want to pay to see. I think what pay-per-view buys these days are really about is how many loyal fans do you have? I think wrestling, like a lot of things, has become very tribal in the sense that you have your company that you support, and I want to support them with my money to pay for this pay-per-view. And I think a lot of people support AEW.
What on earth are you talking about? Wrestling, tribalism.
I know. It's big news. I'm just being speculative here, but I think that's what a lot of people's mentality is.
People don't worship capitalist corporations like it's religion at all. I've never heard of this concept.
Yeah, you're right. I've never seen people on Twitter. No. But that's. I think that in that sense, that's how the business model is changing, and so. To go with both what Immortal Vegan and Leon of the New Geeks were saying. By the way, thank you for having cool names, because when I get to say them, I get to say these really cool names. But it goes back to what they both were saying. It builds your TV portfolio, and it gives you a lot of momentum so that you can build that loyal fan base that will pay for your pay-per-view, regardless of whether your main event match is what we would traditionally consider to be pay-per-view quality. You know, I think that, again, that's a concept that might be changing. But I don't know. You know, Gareth, what do you make of this debate, if you want to weigh in here?
I'll keep it quite short because I think we've pretty much nailed it, really, in terms of the way that the wrestling business is most money comes through TV deals. They'll make more money long-term off this being on TV because of it will draw a higher rating. And therefore, when it comes to the average ratings and when they're negotiating their next deal, this is going to help them negotiate an extra 50 million or whatever. Whereas pay-per-view, AEW pay-per-views, I think the numbers I've seen are something like between like $7 and $10 million, some kind of estimates like that. So like TV basically just makes them so much more money. Also, the point that Sergey said earlier about this being a teaser, and, you know, so this is going to hook people in not just to AEW if they're new fans. If you're a massive Daniel Bryan fan coming out to check him out now in AEW, maybe this convinces you. If it doesn't, I don't know what you're watching. But yeah, like those kind of things are invaluable. Undoubtedly, this show will draw a big number. I don't know when the ratings come out or what exactly it's going to be. But like, yeah, TV is super valuable. But also, the one thing I wanted to say as well was sequels always, or pretty much always, do better than the originals in any walk of life, really. So, or any walk of entertainment. Just because the hype builds and then more people want to jump on board. So when it comes to the pay-per-view, you're probably going to draw a bigger pay-per-view number with a rematch than you are the original. Especially if you see something that good and then go, oh, now they're going to do a 60-minute time limit for the title.
Right.
And I'm going to get a winner. So, yeah, I think basically, if anything, it's a good thing that it was on TV.
Yep. Goes back to
Fantastic
building
segue,
hype, building
by the
momentum.
Fantastic segue, by the way. The ratings have dropped. Brandon Thurston put those on.
Okay.
The viewership for this episode is the third highest they've ever had, behind the debut episode and the episode right after All Out. 1,273,000 viewers. A .48, just one hundredth of a point away from Raw, who had a big jump. It would have been quite a bit ahead of where Raw usually is, but just point oh 0.01 from Raw in the ratings, in the demographic ratings, and yeah, just a really amazing number, a really amazing viewership. We got a lot of people watching this match,
Yep.
and watching the show as a whole, and seeing
Yep.
what AEW has to offer, including matches like this, but also including world title matches like Ruby versus Britt later on
Yep.
in the evening.
Yep,
So
absolutely.
yeah, it like everybody was saying, having this as a thing to draw people to free TV, free in the sense that you already paid for cable, and that you didn't pay extra for the particular show, but
Right.
very valuable to the company. And on another level, it's, as fans, honestly, what difference does it make if it's a good business decision or not? If it's entertaining, that's what
Absolutely.
should matter.
Exactly. I'm so glad that you brought that up, because normally when we get into ratings talk, that's always what I say, is that I don't care what the ratings are. I enjoyed it. That's the most important thing. But it does get to something valuable, which is another point that Leon of the New Geeks made, which is that wrestling is more niche now than it used to be, which is definitely true. And so the ratings are good in the sense that we get to see how much is wrestling moving out of the niche that we all occupy into becoming more and more mainstream. Now, whether or not that's a good thing is something we can debate on some other podcast when we haven't taken an hour just to talk about the first 30 minutes of this show. So with that, if you want to talk about moving out of the niche and moving into the mainstream, is, oh wait, hang on, Leon, one more point that he makes, that the only thing stopping the rise in ratings is the limited household reach of the TNT network. Again, I think the important thing is, I mean, they are moving, so we'll see how much that does. I think the important thing is we enjoyed the show, so we all want more people to enjoy it because we enjoy it. But at the end of the day, they're putting on a show that our wrestling niche currently really, really likes, and I think that's what's really important. Speaking of moving into the mainstream, though, we will finally move into the other parts of this show, and we'll begin with one of the men who is most responsible for taking AEW from that startup to, wow, look at this wrestling company, this is really something, which is, of course, CM Punk. And Punk came out, did his promo, talked about Powerhouse Hobbs. I think one of the big things that he did was, CM Punk is always going to get fan support. He's always going to get people behind him. But I think what is so important about Punk is that he really understands that he brings all of that, and so he can get eyes on other people. And I think a lot more people now are more interested in Powerhouse Hobbs specifically, and of course Hook, because CM Punk is choosing to spend his time with them, putting them over, saying the things that he does about them. And it's just good to see, because you're always concerned when a legend comes back that they're going to make it all about them. And CM Punk, I don't think, is making it all about him. I think he understands the draw that he is, but I think he also understands that he can use his voice and his fame to increase other people's stature, and I think that's what he's doing with Powerhouse Hobbs right now. And at the end of the day, what is a promo supposed to do? It's in the name. It's supposed to promote a match and make me more interested in seeing it. I am now much more interested in seeing Hobbs versus Punk than I was before this promo happened. So I think he did its job. Sergi, what do you think about this promo segment?
Well, I thought it was great. CM Punk is certainly one of the best promos ever. I think that a lot of what this promo was about is about CM Punk defending his current babyface character against any detractors. I've been seeing it a lot lately. This whole, I'm tired of CM Punk coming out and being happy. I want to see him have more edge. I'm tired of big love-ins between CM Punk and the fans. And CM Punk is basically saying, listen to the fans cheering, hear them, and know that you're in a small minority, and I don't give a damn about you. I do not give a damn that some people want me to be more angry. I don't want to be more angry just because it would entertain you.
Mm-hmm.
if that's just a tiny minority of the fans. The fans are happy with exactly who I am. I'm happy with who I am, and there's nothing that's going to change that. And I
Yeah.
can still show a lot of edge against people like Team Taz as sort of an exemplar of the people who are sick of the love-ins, and taking it back into kayfabe and taking it back into a way to use that in a way that's less meta, but it's still meta in a way. That that Team Taz are an example of folks that are sick of this love-in, and against them, I will show that edge.
Is that something people are really complaining about? This seems like a very
Uh,
nitpicky thing. Just have fun.
If you go to
Just
Reddit,
have
you'll
fun.
find complaints about any darn thing.
Just have fun. I don't know. People spend.
It's a vile scum and villainy. I lost the movie quote, but you know what I'm referring to.
It's a wretched hive of scum and villainy for all the
Thank
for
you
all the
very
Star
much.
Wars fans.
Hive was the word I was forgetting.
I was legitimately getting slammed this afternoon for pointing out that spelling offense with a C instead of an S is the British way of spelling it.
I think, to be fair,
There you go. Reddit, everyone, Reddit.
to be fair, in the U.S., offense spelled with a C is offense, which means something totally different. So people might have thought that
Sure.
you were insulting them. I don't know. I'm not defending Reddit by any stretch of the imagination, but Craig, did this promo make you more excited to see the match? Did it do its job as a promo?
Yeah, on what Sergio was saying, the only where I've been aware of that kind of thing is like the What Culture podcast guys were saying that Michael Sidgwick, whatever his name is, in particular, was saying that he was beginning to feel like it was maybe a little bit too much, or maybe he was finding stuff on Twitter. I don't think he was saying himself that he thought it was. I don't think he was annoyed at it. I think he just felt like it was a necessary step for Punk to have a bit more edge, and he did ever so slightly in this promo. Like he came out and he was all smiles and kind of messing around with the crowd, and then by the end he was kind of laying down the law kind of way. I think the CM Punk thing is so heartening to a lot of people. Like the CM Punk wrestling fan thing is beginning to become like a bit of a meme. And it's so because of his character and who he was in WWE and what he represents. And you've got Brian Danielson writing nice messages to the WWE and saying nice things about Vince McMahon that I'll never quite get my head around, but I did still enjoy CM Punk coming out and saying it was nice to have professional wrestling returning to New York for the first time in I can't remember however many years he said, but I don't know. I do enjoy the digs as long as they're measured and witty and smart and they're not just, hey guys, do you know what sucks?
Exactly.
Oh. Even though that's true.
Fair.
But yeah, there we go.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Gareth, I'll give you the last word on this one, talking about this promo, and I want to hear from your perspective, really, how this CM Punk character moves forward. We'll talk more about this when we talk about, of course, the match when it goes down, when it airs on Friday. But from your perspective right now, where does the CM Punk character go next? Does he add that edge, or can he continue to sort of straddle this line between, edgy Punk and, fan favorite, fans love me and I love them back kind of Punk?
That's a really, really good question, because I think the criticism people have is misguided. I think what they want is a proper character and a direction. They want to invest in something because he's been back for a month now. It's like, great, we see you every week again now, and that's amazing. And you bask in the glory. Shout out to Keith Lee. Yeah, I think a lot of people just want to see him do something. A lot of people get very impatient with stuff like that. And what was really great about this promo was he didn't no-sell the fact that something happened last week. He didn't kind of bury what Hobbs did, which was a huge career highlight for him in terms of laying out CM Punk. If I thought I would have been saying that a year ago when he was first signed, like around a year ago anyway. I mean, like, it's crazy. So it's great to see that. And it was really good to see Punk like as a character kind of not just brush over that, but then still kind of be like, but I can't be angry when I come out and I hear this, which is the real side of him, as well as him playing a baby face, as well as that. So it was really good because it kind of actually did both things. And I think it was happy, but there was a little bit more edge than we've had in previous weeks.
Yeah.
It was just enough, I think, to the point where I think he measured it perfectly, basically. But yeah, in terms of where he moves forward, obviously, I think he's going to wrestle Starks and maybe even Hook pay-per-view main event. Apparently, that's what I'm hearing.
That's if you
but,
believe Anthony, then yeah, that's the full gear main
Yeah.
event for the Hook title.
Exactly. But yeah, so I think Ricky Starks has actually got another kind of a bit of an injury right now, but presumably he's going to go through all of them. And I don't know, maybe Starks is going to be at the pay-per-view or something like that. Presumably Hook actually won't be, unless Anthony's dreams come true. But yeah, so I think for the immediate future, it's just going to be like a bit of just a mid-card in terms of what you'd like. It's just kind of like, obviously Punk's a huge star, but it's just in terms of that, like, it's just there, and that's great and that's fine because that's partly what Punk wants to come back and do. He doesn't want to come back and be the only guy at the top, especially when he's not got the title and there's guys like Adam Cole, Bryan Danielson, Kenny Omega. He doesn't want to come in and just
Right.
be the one guy because that's what happened to him when he should have been the guy back in the day. So I think he wants to kind of earn his stripes a bit in that, based purely on what I've heard. And then from there, I don't know which feud will be, but it'll depend on his objectives, his character objectives. I think if into the new year he starts to eye the title, maybe then builds his rankings, going through a couple more. Maybe a high-profile feud. I still really want to see Jon Moxley. One thing I'm desperate to see is Jon Moxley turn heel and just dump Punk on his head, and like not do the stupid suplex version of the paradigm shift. Dump him on his head and just let the booze rain in. Next time Dynamite's in Chicago, just do that.
As you want to talk about nuclear heat.
Yeah. But I think he's going to be someone who's going to kind of react to what kind of happens around him. Like for this one, it was Taz just like jumped on the mic and said, "Oi, keep my guys' names out your mouth." And it was kind of a bit weird and random, but Taz being a guy who just gets pissed off at absolutely anything for no reason, it just worked, and it's something that most people want to see, so it's good. But yeah, I think he'll be a bit more reactive, and then hopefully into the new year when he really starts eyeing the title and stuff, sometime next year, he'll be a bit more proactive as a babyface, and then from there he can turn heel at some point, hopefully, because Punk as a heel is just the best.
Yep, I would agree with that. I said it before he debuted, and I continue to think that. Let's skip ahead a little bit because our man Craig, as he alluded to earlier, he's a very busy man now, and he is not going to be able to stick around for, I don't know, the 5 hours it's going to take us to get through this thing. I don't know. But one thing that Craig really does want to talk about, and I want to indulge him here, is Cody Rhodes versus Malachi Black. This was something that a lot of the conversation has focused around the fact that Cody was getting booed, and a lot of people wanted to talk about that, and it was weird to me because I don't know if it's just because I follow it more than the average person, but I was not surprised in the least that Cody got booed. I was fully expecting that because Malachi Black is really over, and fans will boo the person who's facing a babyface, right? I mean, it's just when fans are engaged, that's what they do. And even though Malachi Black isn't a babyface, the fans still have that connection with him, and so they booed Cody. Like I didn't find that surprising at all. What I think was so great about this match is that Cody leaned into it. I think he understood that this is gonna be the treatment that he's gonna be getting, and and he just rolled with it. And I think that is emblematic in the fact that when you look specifically at the fouls, Cody had 3 fouls. Malachi only had 1. Now, Malachi's foul, of course, led to the finish of the match, but it just shows you that Cody understands this is what he's going to be doing, and he played the character that people were sort of expecting to see from him, or at least wanting to see from him. So maybe we're looking at a potential Cody Rhodes heel turn. I don't know, but I really, really loved this match. It obviously wasn't my favorite of the night, but I think it did exactly what it was supposed to do. So, Craig, you wanted to specifically talk about this one. You compiled the numbers, so let's hear your thoughts on Cody Rhodes versus Malachi Black.
Yeah, it was a very strange match. It was really excellent when Malachi Black was just like winning, essentially until he black masked, if that's what it's being called, Cody out of the ring, like when he was like a dead weight on the outside. Cody didn't put any more than 4 moves like together. He hit 4 strikes in the second minute, one after the other, and then until, wow, okay, hold on, and he didn't do that again until he didn't hit 4 moves in a row again until the 9th minute, the 10th minute. But like around minute 7, he was getting like strike downs and grapples and stuff in with Malachi Black, reversing the odd one. Whereas like Malachi Black had like, you know, he got huge offense in the 4th minute and the 5th minute and blah blah blah. But I found this match really, really entertaining when Malachi Black just kept reversing everything, Cody's every attempt to get back into it, and when he was just being put over as this like monster. Mm-hmm. But when you look at him, he's not like your prototypical monster, which is a really interesting character. He's dangerous striking. He's obviously portrayed as this kind of like almost like evil genius. The match to me rather fell apart when all the Cody stuff started happening. When Arn was on the rope and when they were shouting at each other, and I didn't like the finish. I think when you've got something like the Black Mass, Cody could like get distracted or whatever with his Cody drama, and then Malachi Black can just kick his head off. I didn't feel the need for the silly Black Mist thing. But yeah, it was I felt a little flat at the end, but for the first kind of like 6 minutes, I thought it was really, really excellent. Again, until, or yeah, go for it.
No, I was going to say, you know, to play off what you were saying about the finish, you know, I've seen lots of different people have lots of different opinions about that. I think to push back slightly, I like the Black Mist just because it's a reminder that Malachi Black is a heel and he will play as a heel. And I think it's similar to what we're seeing with Kenny in the sense that they're saying Malachi Black is dangerous. He doesn't need to do this, but he's going to because he's an evil son of a bitch, and that's what he does. The only thing I would say is
just he also like scooted out of the ring straight away and was like up the ramp, which again is something that I also kind of there's negative connotations around that because that's like the WWE thing, isn't it? I suppose because he's a bad guy, it's not as bad, and like what's he gonna do, like mist Cody and then hang around in the ring? I mean, I suppose it would be, you could stare him down. That might have, the minute by minute for this is really effective. You can see how dominant Black was, and then Cody comes back into it, and Black is very much against the tide at that point.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring that up because I think, again, it goes back to what we were talking about with the Omega Danielson match, which is you see that Cody immediately is having to fight from behind and having to fight from such a large deficit that even when he has these massive spikes, Black evens out like almost halfway through the match. His spike sort of stops. But Cody has a massive spike for like 5 minutes, and he still can't even get close to Malachi Black in terms of offense, which again, I think it really goes to show all of those people that I think were misguided in saying, oh, Cody's booked too strong, he's got the golden shovel or whatever. No, look at what he's doing here. He's showing you that a fiery babyface comeback for 5 minutes can't even get him close to Malachi Black, which I think is how Cody is always booked. He's presented strong, but when he needs to lose, he does lose. And I think the only change I would have made was instead of the small package, I would have had Malachi Black. I would have had him just black mass him again. But I think that's kind of a nitpicky thing. I
don't know. It just makes him look stronger to me.
Yeah.
That would make him look stronger if they were dead set on doing the mist thing.
Yeah.
The black mass, and that that's quite scary because he's properly put him down.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think it would have made him look stronger at the end of the day. But that's everyone has their own opinions. I've seen people say they like the small package. Just a matter of opinion. Gareth, what did you think about this match? What do you think about Malachi Black coming out of this?
It was an interesting one. Craig's broken it down really well there. Yeah, I really enjoyed watching this. The reactions of the crowd and stuff. It's not good, but when Arn fell off the first time accidentally, I pissed myself. So funny. I was a little bit worried that he was legitimately hurt for a minute, and then when he got up, I was like, okay, it's fine, I can laugh again. It was just like one of those things where I was just like, what is he doing? Like trying to like scoot around that like corner post, like just. I think he probably was just a bit out of place and realized, shit, I need to be over there for the spot, and then I don't know. Kind of tried to rush it. I don't know. In the end, it wasn't too bad because he managed to get up and it didn't look too convoluted. But yeah, it was funny. But back to the actual match. I had a lot of fun watching this. And one of the spots I had in my head was Black hitting the Black Mass or whatever they call it. I don't know what they call it in AEW.
I don't think they've given it a name.
Yeah. I think they might just call it like a spinning heel kick.
Yeah, they call it the move name, so I feel like there might be something there. Like it has a name, they just haven't said it yet.
Yeah, maybe. But yeah, but anyway, and Cody falling out of the ring. So when that happened, I was like, oh, that's great because that's one thing. One thing that because I was thinking they'd probably do a different finish other than the Black Mass. I'll just call it. Just because they usually especially their kind of top guys, to have two finishes. So Cody's got the Crossroads and then the Ric Flair figure four.
Yep.
Yeah, which don't know if he'll keep using that. Then they've got Mox has obviously the Bulldog and then Paradigm Shift. And Black used this I forget exactly what it was, but it was a form of a Dragon Sleeper in WWE. He started using it. And I loved it, and he did it so well, and I was hoping it was going to be that. But the Black Mist I imagine that's something that he is very into. So I imagine that is kind of something that he's pitched. And yeah, it's something which I don't mind if it's brought out here and there and storyline things. I think maybe this was just a way to establish that for him.
Yeah.
But what I really would have loved is him to do that and then hit a Black Mass anyway. Just because a roll up always even though there was the spray used as well, it wasn't just a roll up. But even so, there's still a roll up. It always, I don't know, it's one of those WWE things where it bugs me a little bit. But so
roll ups suck. They're never good. They're sneaky and
if a company did them so rarely that sometimes within a story element they could be all right, or just in a weird little comedy match it's fine or whatever. But yeah, in this I would have liked him to have hit that and then just murder him with a Black Mass, and that would have been really menacing, and then you've established that he's got that, but you still hit that. I don't know, again, like you said, Griff, it is probably down to personal taste and all that. But it didn't ruin my enjoyment of the match, and it was nice to see that he established something new as well. I think was something I was glad to see, just because the Black Mass is really great, But it's always great when a wrestler's got more than one thing in their back pocket. So
Yeah, yeah.
that was a nice thing, I think, to establish.
I'm with you. I would love it if he started doing. I've heard it. I don't know if this is an official move name or if someone had named it this, but I've heard that modified Dragon Sleeper called the Dragon Slayer, which I would love to see him do that because I agree with you. It looks just absolutely nasty when he does it. When he was Tommy End on the Indies, he used a diving double foot stomp, which his is one of the best I've seen. I'd love to see him bring that back out. But yeah, I think there's not a lot of people that have a foul as a finishing move, to use our terminology for it. But I think AEW does push the envelope a little bit because you talk about roll-ups. I mean, Darby Allin has a roll-up finisher, right? The what does he call it? The Last Supper, I think. That mousetrap cover.
Yeah, that's one element where it works because it really fits his character and how he
Right.
wrestles matches. That is that is one way where a roll-up can work, especially if it's an established kind of modified roll-up that looks harder to kick out of than a normal.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
one looks convincing, I'd say. I almost feel like Okada kind of set that trend when he started using that. I don't even know what to call it. The pin hold that he used against Omega to win the first fall in the 2 out of 3 falls match. He kind of is like sitting essentially on his chest with his legs pulled all the way forward.
Yeah, I don't remember the name for that, but yeah, I know what you're talking about. So
Don't know if it has one, but yeah.
I'm sure it does. I'm not smart enough to know what it is. I think, to be fair, a small package looks like it would be really difficult to kick out of, because it feels like that would you don't have the use of any of your muscles besides just your core. And if you're a fat bastard like me, your core doesn't really have a whole lot of muscle to speak of. So it looks like it would be difficult for me to kick out of. But your point is well taken, that if it's overused, then then none of it looks effective. So it's all a matter of personal taste, whether you think it's being overused in AEW or not. I think we can all agree it's overused in WWE, which is where Malachi comes from. So maybe he takes a little bit of that, some of the inspiration that he used in matches there. I don't know. I don't want to speculate. Sergi, I'll give you the last word on this from a stylistic perspective. Again, we'll go back to styles make fights from your end. Is this something that we could expect stylistically to see more from Malachi Black, specifically when it comes to his offense? You would think that in a grudge match like this, you would see a little bit closer offensive percentages, but Malachi had 61% of the offense. Is that something we should expect to see from him going forward?
I think that what we can expect from Malachi Black is consistency. There are a few wrestlers that are very effective at giving you a very different mix of offense against different opponents. Darby Allin is my favorite example of that. Malachi Black is the opposite. He has a thing he does, and he does it consistently. It doesn't matter if he is fighting a scrub or if he's fighting the best in the world. He hardly ever uses grapples, which is really amazing. That it really pushes just how much of a striking specialist he is, and to some extent submission specialist. That he almost completely eschews grapple moves. It's not that he's not capable of them. We saw a great was it a DDT or something through the table when he fought Dustin the other week. But I think that's the only one he's used the whole time he's been in AEW, just about. And just and it's a thing that it's amazing that he's able to get away with without it taking away from his confidence or projection of confidence, because 90% of the time, if you see someone suddenly not using grapples, it shows they were intimidated by their opponent. They didn't want to mix it up with them and really get in with them. You see that when someone is up against someone that's a higher level than what they're used to fighting. And for Malachi Black, that's his standard. doesn't bother with grapples. He's a striker. It varies how much he's the volume striking, but he's always got great power striking. The volume striking is just a matter of how many hits did it take. Sometimes more, sometimes less. But he's always knocking people down. And let's see. He leaves his feet somewhat, less than some, more than others, but with the submissions and the counter wrestling, and of course mind games. That's where he's really strong, and he's very consistent with that in every match. In some ways, other than the grappling part, but in the foul aspect, in the aspect of rule breaking, he has some similarities to Miro in the sense that what he's doing in terms of what makes him evil or what makes him a villain in the story doesn't require a lot of cheating. I mean, he's credited with one foul. I assume that's the finisher, the Black Mist. That was the only one he used the whole darn match. And I think that's really interesting that we've got a character who, like you were saying, he has the black mask. He didn't need to cheat at all. And that's true. But also he's a villain, and he didn't bother to cheat except for the mist, which on some level is sort of symbolic. He's like, he's not just cheating like the way that like a Chris Jericho just like, I love bending the rules. I love doing things behind the referee's back, that kind of thing. Right. But the mist is more of a, this is, I'm depicting not someone who's a little bit of a rule breaker. This is supposed to show someone who's like filled with corruption, and that corruption is spewing out at everybody, and it's just it's intended to be very
very symbolic, right? That's
symbolic, and also just very spooky. Spooky's a weak word for it. Very intimidating on a very, like, this is someone who's sort of supernatural and very scary. Right. The other thing is, like you were saying, he was cheered. He's very consistently getting cheered. He is. It's interesting. He's a villain who gets cheered, but in a very different way than who we're going to be talking about later, Britt Baker, DMD. Yes. I think that I would make the comparison of them to Undertaker and The Rock when they were villains, but still getting cheered. One is the spooky, dark character that people cheer just because, the same reason people sometimes will cheer for Darth Vader. Just like, this guy is scary and I kind of love it. Right. Or a horror lead character like your Jason or that kind of thing. Right. Or like the Undertaker, as I was saying. Whereas Britt Baker has this kind of thing going on that's more like what The Rock was, of people like just what a they say the kind of nasty things that people have on their minds of right. Just like, can you believe he said something so outrageous? Can you believe she said something so outrageous? And that's kind of the appeal. Yeah. Yeah, I'm only kind of guessing there, as I don't really quite understand Britt's appeal. As a babyface, or not as a fan favorite for some reason, despite being the villain.
Well, we can certainly get into that when we talk about Britt Baker later on. It's a great comparison that you make. But I have to do this again. I promised you the last word, but I actually want to hear from Craig on the last word on this. Because we've spent this whole time talking about Malachi Black, and I've completely forgotten that there actually was a second person in this match, and that, of course, is Cody Rhodes. There's a lot of talk about what Cody Rhodes might be doing next, and as the man who put these numbers together and has studied Cody Rhodes more than almost anyone else because of how much Cody's been in the ring and how many numbers that you've collated, Craig, it really seems like Cody is at a little bit of a crossroads here with his character. So my question to you is, where does he go next? I mean, where would you like to see him, and where do you think is realistic for him?
So the interesting stat from this is that Cody did 0 submissions at all, which is very different for him. Perhaps that was, as Sergey said about Kenny Omega and Daniel Bryanson. Daniel Bryanson, there we
Daniel
go.
Bryanson.
Bryan Danielson. He's almost like seeded it to Black. Kind of started the submissions early. For me, Cody's a fascinating character. He's done like some of the best things in AEW. He's as a human being, he's really, really fascinating. He seems like an incredibly self-aware, kind of confident person, like don't like it, change it kind of person. But then at times he seems very, very potentially overindulgent. But is that just because he's honest? He's been a huge part of building this company. Why would you do that if you want to put yourself in somewhat of a good position? It's also business sense to do that because of who he is and his kind of aura. For me, he has to turn heel, or he is going to be Cena, Rhodes, I don't know, Cody, Cena. Can't really fit that metaphor together very well, but I think he's saying on social media that he would rather retire than become a heel. But he has also said on social media, I saw a fan messaging and being like, Black should win, Cody, come on. And Cody replied being like, well, if I was just going to let somebody win, what am I even doing here? Which is obviously sort of kayfabe. So it's really hard to see where the character ends with him. Just from having listened to him talk and the way that he seems to be, I think he is self-aware enough to do the right thing. And I do believe in this situation, doing the right thing is shifting his character and becoming a heel. And I think if he does that, he'll protect his legacy, which is going to be enormous by the end of all this. I think turn heel and follow that road. Don't do Cena stubbornness. We've all been there. It's very tedious.
It's completely fair, but I do think to empathize with him, with how much he's been through and what he has created with AEW. I think it's completely understandable that he would say, I want to just bask in the cheers for a little bit. I think he went out there and the fans went nuts for him, and his pyro goes off, and you just feel that energy. And I think it's completely understandable for him to say, you know what, I really love this. There has to be something grating for a lot of people. People like MJF, I think, are built to handle the booze, right? I think he'll be a heel his whole career, and I think he'll love it. But I think for Cody, he's someone who, the booze, I think he really likes, and it's total speculation. I don't know him personally, but just from what we've seen, it seems like, he likes being a heel, but it really feels like he loved being cheered, and he loved feeling
It'll come back
that.
around again, though.
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think long term, he should turn heel. I think for his character is better as a heel. I think he himself is better at playing a heel because he can do it more consistently. When he was a babyface against the Inner Circle, it was phenomenal. But I think that has a lot to do with Jericho being a great heel, and he can play off of that. So I think he can be the guy that people play off of as a heel. He can't really do that as a babyface as effectively. But I agree with you. I think, he's still young in terms of wrestling. So, he can be a heel, and he can really bring something to the company. And then when he hangs him up, he'll be a babyface forever. I think as soon as he decides to hang up the boots for real, He will be cheered every place he goes till the end of time, and he'll deserve it because of what he's done for fans who were tired of the status quo of wrestling. He helped create AEW, and I think he'll get that reaction, which is what he deserves. And it's the same reaction that Craig will deserve because he helped create, of course, Pro Wrestling Musing. He'll be a babyface forever, in our opinion. He won't be like that Anthony guy who's turned heel like 57 times on the podcast. So, Craig, you gotta go prepare for your other life outside of wrestling. So, thanks so much for joining us to talk about these ones. Thanks for putting these numbers together. We know how hard you work, so we really, really appreciate you on that one, Craig.
Cheers. See you later. Bye-bye.
Garrett's that one guy. he's that
Gareth
guy.
is turning heel on us.
He'll join Anthony. We got
See
a
you
heel
later.
faction. Thanks again, Craig.
Bye.
Let's trend backwards a little bit and talk about the match that we skipped over. When you talk about career heels, I just mentioned his name. MJF is the careerist of career heels, in my opinion. The dude's like 25 years old, which is something that you always have to remember, that he's at the point where most wrestlers are just starting to, break in and just starting to figure out, how do I wrestle on TV? What is my character going to look like? And MJF, he's past all that. He's to the point that he walks out in front of 20,000 people in Arthur Ashe, and it just, the heat is so nuclear. Like on Saturday, we're going to be talking to someone who was in the audience for Grand Slam, and I'm really excited for that. Subscribe, by the way, because we're going to be doing that one live as well. But I just want to hear like how the heat would just radiate off these people for MJF. He is so hated, and I think it's awesome. I really love that MJF just revels in being hated that way. This match to me was made by MJF. I think Brian Pillman is great. I think he's got a real future, but to me, MJF was really the star of this one. He really made this match into the really enjoyable contest that it was. So, Gareth, when we're talking about this match, the numbers I think are fantastic. AEW loves to do this kind of thing when they have a legitimately hated heel like MJF, and I think this was the perfect match to put after Danielson, Omega, and then CM Punk, and it ends up with, of course, the heel going over, but I think Brian Pillman looked about as good as he could look in a match like this. Jeez, Gareth, what'd you think about this one?
Yeah, it's really interesting, especially when you look at the stats and stuff. You see that Pillman Jr. has 73% of the match offense. But then when you look at the flow of offense chart, you see that MJF actually has more in for quite a period of the match. He kind of controls the bulk of the match, and it's just that Pillman's highs are so high, and he kind of keeps just behind MJF throughout, like kind of level, which is interesting. And it's classic babyface heel stuff, but it's interesting when you see such a difference in that match offense percentage, particularly. And then when you look at the chart, you would expect something completely different. But yeah, again, Pillman's highs were just that high. So that's basically the explanation behind it. But like you say, this was a match kind of built around MJF's heat, basically. It's interesting as well, like when you think about cool down matches between, to break up a show or whatever, there wasn't really one on this. Like, there wasn't really one going in where you'd say, oh, this is a cool down match. But this, for this night, was the cool down match. And the cool down was basically, right, we're going to keep the crowd hot, but we're going to keep them hot by booing instead of going mental the entire time. And then just having those comeback spots for Pillman to remind them that they can still go crazy. And yeah, it was just great, really. In terms of, like, we were talking about Cody's character before. If you want to get him cheered, like if he's not turning heel, now would be a good time to revisit the MJF feud because he's not really got much going on. Potentially there's something with Darby Allin there because he's been feuding with members of the Pinnacle. But yeah, maybe that's that if because I mean just watching this, like, who could you? I mean, Jericho was someone for a long time who like he would get cheered and stuff, but he was still a heel, and fans were more cheering him because of his song and all these kind of things.
Yeah.
And MJF, even with me as someone who really doesn't like Jericho, managed to get Jericho over as a babyface because I hate him that much. Even though obviously as a performer I think he's fantastic, but just like when he's actually in the moment, you can't help but hate him basically. So
Oh, absolutely.
yeah, that definitely be something great for Cody, but very interesting match. Again, kind of classic babyface heel stuff, but when you look at the numbers, just like not what I would expect at all, really.
Yep, absolutely agreed. Sergi, again, I hate to I hate to box you in as the Styles make fights guy, but it's so you deal with such interesting. I mean, you are, and the reason why I keep coming to you for this particular question is because I think the fighting style, especially in the case of someone like MJF, is so interesting because MJF is someone who's built around a character, and his promo work, his character work is why you boo him. However, as a heel, I think it's very easy to forget that you also have to be able to structure a match in such a way that people will still boo you, right? I mean, it's not just the spots like the Julia Hart involvement, which I thought was great. But it's not just that. It's about how do you fight on a minute-by-minute basis that continues to reinforce the fact that people should be booing you, that people should dislike you. And MJF, the reason why I think he's an all-time level heel, or he will end up retiring as an all-time level heel, that he is one of the best heels in the world, is not just because of the promos. It's not just because of the spots. I think it's because of that minute-by-minute, him being just a bastard the entire time he's fighting. And I think that really comes out in his fighting style, which is a lot different than almost anyone we see in AEW. So, Sergi, if you would, take us through MJF's style and why it works so well. And presumably, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but presumably why it worked so well in this match.
Right. Well, it's interesting because there's nothing that you can do in a match, I would say, that is inherently heelish. Does that make sense? I think that that Craig, if he were still here, would disagree with me. He feels like people are getting heelish anytime they cheat, and it's like technically. I mean, I'm not sure exactly what he counts sometimes, but I mean, technically, a closed fist is against the rules. We just had somebody get admonished for the closed fist and pulled off of someone. I think it might have been Ruby Soho, and it was over the closed fist. And there are two types of offense. Well, maybe three. That are more associated with heelishness. Your submissions, for sure, fouls, and to some extent mind games. But there are definitely babyface ways to do those. You'll have your honorable submission specialist, the shooters, the technical specialist that uses a lot of submissions, and you've got like your gritty guy who will use that will foul a lot but still be loved, or you've got somebody like Orange Cassidy whose game is built around mind games but is still beloved. But for MJF, I think a big part of it is that he focuses a great deal on those heel-associated types of offense, but also his pacing, I think, is really important. You look at that chart that Gareth mentioned. How interesting that chart was. You had the babyface going up and down, and MJF was even keel throughout the match. Just steady pace of offense. That methodicalness is really what is effective in communicating the type of character that he is through his offense, for sure.
that's a really interesting way of looking at this, especially when it comes to this graph, because the reason why I think even keel pace is heelish when in the right hands is because this match, like Gareth said and like you said, is a very traditional babyface heel kind of match. And the reason why we call it that is because from the very beginning of wrestling characters, there was an understanding that baby faces, when they fall behind, need to generate sympathy, and then when they come back, that's when the fans can really get invested. It's why they call it a comeback, right? Because that's when the fans really start getting invested. And the reason why solid pace is heelish when it's someone like MJF, when it's someone who really understands what they're doing, is because you never give the babyface a chance to come back, and you never give the fans a chance to get behind the babyface. You always have, and you can see from the 3rd minute through the 7th minute, MJF is ahead the whole time. He's constant pace, and he's always ahead. And so you never give the fans even an indication that the babyface might be able to come back out of this. There's what we call hope spots, and the babyface, Pillman will get a hope spot, and then MJF shuts it right down. And it's high level stuff because you're understanding what the fans think before they think it, right? You're understanding how are the fans going to react to this thing I'm doing, and MJF gets that in real time. And then when the babyface finally does make his comeback, that's when MJF understands, again, just another typical heelish thing. MJF gets, you know what? I got to start selling this, right? I'm a heel. The fans want to see me get my ass kicked, so I got to start selling myself getting my ass kicked. And that's exactly what he does. And the way that he screams when he takes, back body drops, and, his facial expressions and the things that he does, like all of it comes together and makes such an effective heel that you not only hate during a match and want to see him get his ass kicked, but because of him, you love the babyface more. The cheers when Brian Pillman made his comeback were so much louder than the cheers when he was making his entrance. Because when he's making his entrance, it's a referendum on him, the character, and only him. When he's making his comeback, it's a referendum on him as well as his opponent. And MJF just gets the fans involved so much that, he could be fighting a hamster, and the hamster would be cheered like he was, CM Punk at Money in the Bank, because of how good MJF is at putting that babyface over. I don't know if there's anyone in the world that is better at doing the little things as a heel than MJF is. And, that's just the little things when it comes to... Say again? Jay White?
Jay White.
Yeah, Jay White is the only guy I would put there.
Yeah, but besides that, yeah, I agree.
Well, I used to say, I've been saying this now for a couple years, and it's a little outdated because Randy Orton's now a babyface. But for me, the top 3 heels in the world are MJF, Jay White, and Randy Orton, and I don't think it's close. I don't know if there's anyone who's on that level, just in terms of being a despicable heel that people boo. You can be a cool heel, Jericho or Jacob Fatu and MLW. You can be cool, but in terms of just being a heel that people just hate, it's MJF, Jay White, and Orton. And now the Elite have gotten onto that level as well because of their character work, but we'll talk about that. We talked about that a lot. We will undoubtedly talk about it again. One last thing I will say.
Today.
Oh, I guess we haven't talked about it.
That match is for the Elite come into it on Rampage this time.
Yeah, that's
Other
true.
than Omega, which we already talked about.
Right, so we talked about Omega, and we will talk about the rest of the Elite when we talk about Rampage. Again, going live on Saturday, we'll be talking with someone who was there at Arthur Ashe, so make sure you don't miss it. You can ask him all of your questions.
That's going to be so cool. Plug.
Absolutely. That is going to be a lot of fun. One last thing I will say, the Julia Hart involvement, I loved that because, again, you don't need more heat if you're MJF, but he just goes out of his way to get more heat. And I think Julia Hart just sold it great. The fact that, she almost got physically assaulted by MJF, Pillman saved her, and then immediately she picks up the pom-poms and starts doing her thing again. And it's like, I really liked it because, again, it just brought me into the match. And that's, at the end of the day, really what MJF is about, is just bringing you into matches like this. When it comes to bringing people into matches, almost no one in the history of wrestling has done it better than Sting. You talk about the other side of the coin. For a heel who understands how to be a heel, Sting has always understood how to be a babyface. And he did it again here when he teamed up with Darby Allin to take on FTR. Now we'll talk about who should have won that match because there's a lot of different opinions, and I'm curious to hear your guys's. But just from the match itself, I thought this wasn't as good as Sting and Darby versus Men of the Year, but I think that had the added novelty of it being Sting's first match. So I think that really added to it. But as a match, I thought it was really fun. I thought FTR sold the way they were supposed to, and I thought Sting and Darby showed the fire that they were supposed to show. And I look, I don't know what else to call this match other than just a lot of fun. So, Gareth, what did you think about this one? Do you think that it was? Did you think that it did its job in terms of just getting the fans involved with it and getting Sting out there and getting that sort of babyface pop?
Yeah, 100%. This was, again, a lot like the Cody one. I just had so much fun just watching this. It was just such a fun match to watch, and so much of that was built around Sting, like you said, just knowing how to play a babyface and knowing how to get people invested and interested in him and then in the match as well. FTR probably as well, some of the best heels and in terms of being a tag team. They're very much, it's funny they're in the pinnacle because they're very much the MJF of tag teams in that sense. They're not the same character-wise, obviously.
Yeah.
They're not quite as just terrible people. Like they're family guys, in many ways they're actually quite relatable, but they're just also so good at just breaking apart the guys that you love. Mm-hmm. And that's exactly what they did for periods of this match. Darby as well is one of the best in particularly at being the underdog, and fighting from behind and stuff, but being that babyface as well. So it's a concoction really that was always going to lead to a great match. And it did. Like, I kind of just had this moment because I didn't grow up with Sting, and when he came, I was like, oh, this is cool because I know about Sting and I know he's a nice guy. So I was happy for him that he was getting to end his career in a way that made sense for him and a way on his own terms. Whereas if he'd ended it with the WWE run, which number one was cut short by injury anyway, but number two, like he was getting beaten by Triple H in this weird WCW kick him to the mud kind of match, and it just wasn't the way that a legend like him should go out. So that was great. But even now, I'm like, it's funny. People were saying like, "Oh, this Sting kid looks like he's going to be a real star." But for me, this is in terms of in real time. This is within the first 10 matches probably that I'm seeing with him. I did see him a bit in Impact, well TNA as it was. When I watched that for a while back in the day, but to be honest, I can't remember most of it. I remember watching him, but I don't remember what he was doing or anything like that. Mm-hmm. And I was very much like, I didn't tune in weekly, it was here and there and all that. So in terms of like watching him properly, this is, besides the WWE run, this is the first I've really seen in real time. So it is almost a bit like, oh, this Sting guy, I'm really starting to like him. Like properly, really getting invested in him myself. So which is really great. And it's crazy how good he is at, like, you don't want to like be patronizing to guys like, for example, Dustin or Jericho when they have a great match, because they're absolute masters in terms of in-ring psychology and stuff. And Sting's obviously one of those as well, but it's ridiculous how good he is physically at 62 years old. I remember, like, I knew he was like around 60, but it was someone tweeted it yesterday and I was like, he's actually 62. Like, he's over that threshold, and like, I don't know, it's crazy.
It is. It is. I'll tell you what 3 words kept popping into my mind watching this match: old man strength. That's what came to mind with Sting, because that's what it looks like. They weren't trying to sell him. Like, if you watch his stuff from the early 90s in WCW, the dude was a phenomenal athlete. Like, the Stinger Splash, it used to be so impactful because he would jump up and, like, knee you in the face. and it was like he was, I think, more athletic than a lot of people give him credit for. They don't present him like that anymore. They just present him like he's just strong, like he hits people and they react. And like, if you've had like your 60-year-old dad that you've seen like chopping wood in the backyard or something, and you're like, how is he that? Like, it doesn't make sense physically. That's what Sting is. Like, he just has old man strength, and I love it because they sell it well. Everyone sells it well. You're not asking me to suspend my disbelief very much with Sting, which is the one thing that you're always concerned about with someone of this age, that you're worried that, you know, he'd be doing stuff and people would sell it and you'd be like, well, what the hell is this? Like, this dude's in his 60s. But no, I think with Sting, people sell the stuff correctly because all you're asking me to believe is that he's super strong, and I believe that. Yeah,
it's interesting as well. Obviously recently Evander Holyfield returned to boxing and was awful, but he still looks in good shape,
right?
But like it's just like, it's one of those things, it's all aesthetics and stuff like that, whereas Sting, to be fair, he doesn't look his age. A part of that might be face paint, I don't know, but he doesn't look 62 to start with. But like, yeah, even so, like, he still doesn't look like he used to, for example. But it's exactly what you say, like, I can buy this way more than I could buy Evander Holyfield in an actual fight. And if you just looked at them purely, you know, without actually watching them or anything, you would think, oh, Evander Holyfield, he's got muscles, I imagine he's still quite athletic. And then you would see him and he's just like, I don't even know what you call it. Like, and then you see Sting and it's just like, how is he doing this? It's crazy. But like you say, a lot of it was that old man strength, because a lot of it was just like, I don't want to say him standing around, because he wasn't standing. He was running the ropes really well. But like, there were these moments where he's just delivering strikes and stuff, and FTR sold them brilliantly. And I was just like, I just believe this guy's a complete badass, and it was crazy. Like, it was just amazing to watch. It was really
exactly.
fun.
You've convinced me that a 62-year-old man is a badass.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think a big part of why it works is that that the aspects of it that don't rely on your opponent selling, he's fantastic at those too. You know, like the flying crossbody when they had Darby in a pile driver position and he was saving him from it. So he's like leaping over Darby Allin to deliver this offense. And, you know, people were like, FTR made Sting look great. It's like the FTR did not, you know, impart on Sting the ability to do that leap.
Right.
You know, if he could still pull that off, there's no reason why any of this other offense that I shouldn't bite on it and find it perfectly credible, regardless of his age. You know, it's like, I don't know. Maybe he's a vampire. I don't know. I don't know why he's able to do that at 62, but he is. It's very clear that he is. It's not a case of. I mean, there are a lot of guys who, for whatever reason, they have such a huge fan base that they go beyond what their body is really capable of, and it's really very obvious that people, you know, you have a match with someone, and it's no different than, you know, a wrestler selling for a 12-year-old or whatever, you know, just or for a blow-up doll or whatever the case may be. That you know, it's very much that kind of thing where people are very obviously wrestling around them, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And that's never the case with Sting.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, for me,
I wanted to add one more thought to that, which is that it goes to in that match with Man of the Year where Sting did the same thing. He did the flying cross off of the stage onto the ground. And again, it's AEW, whoever puts this match together, if it is Sting himself or if they have producer help or whoever puts this match together, I think just really understands that there is a line that they have to toe between, you know, not wearing Sting out, because again, he is 62, but also convincing people that, yeah, we got an old guy in this match. I mean, I don't mean to say old disparagingly, but we have a guy who's much older than your typical wrestler in this match. But we have to convince you that, you know, people are not, as you say, Sergi, working around him, that he actually deserves to be in this match. And I think so far, they've just done a tremendous job of actually doing that, of towing that line brilliantly. And every time you start to think, oh, are we seeing Sting's age come out? They have him do something that just reminds you, oh, nope, never mind. This guy actually, he's slower than, the 20 and 30-year-olds that we have here, but he's still got something to give. And matching him up with Darby Allin, who is just perpetual motion. He's constantly moving. He's constantly selling. He does all of this crazy stuff, like a coffin drop onto the apron, which is nasty. I don't know why he does that to himself. The man is absolutely out of his mind. But to combine that with then a Scorpion Deathlock from Sting is like, it just works so well. Whoever had the idea of putting Darby and Sting together, if that was Sting himself or whoever it was, hats off to you. That was just an incredible decision. Great partnership from them. And it continues to work, and they continue to use it sparingly so that every time Sting's in a match, I get invested in it. And I think a lot of people do as well.
Well, I think that before it happened, it definitely is the sort of thing that people could have predicted, and might have seemed a little excessively on the nose. Before the fact of, like, well, you've got this Darby Allin. People have compared him to Sting before because he's got this sort of vigilante in the rafters looking down on people, the face paint. There's a lot of comparisons to be made, and then pairing them together, it might have seemed just like, oh well, these are guys that have these similarities, and nothing more to it than that.
Yeah.
And you're right, it turned out to be quite a bit more than that, in the sense of they do seem like, in some ways, like real soulmates. Like there's just a genuine connection between them across the generations, and just a really genuine respect, not just as wrestlers, but as creative minds. That they see each other as creative minds within wrestling, and really respect each other, not just athletically, but also just as someone who has something to bring to the table in terms of ideas, and ways to make something work.
Yeah.
Which I'm going to go to my one criticism of this, was the setup. The face paint thing had me so angry and livid. I did not feel like beating FTR in a tag team match and making them look foolish, since they're supposed to be the tag team specialists, was enough of a comeuppance. I was ready for them to come down with pipes and chains and be like, match? We're not having a match. We're going to try to kill you. And just like, they never rang a bell. They just kicked their ass, I think that it's such an extreme provocation that it's just like, that's something that should be used sparingly, and should definitely be a warning. Should be, like, hey, this, don't go this far with us,
Yeah.
because it's just like, you took their faces off. Like, they should be taking your faces off. But once it actually started, and it's like, yes, okay, this is an excellent match. I was looking more for a brawl, but let's forget the provocation and the story. It out of context, in a vacuum, this is a fantastic tag team match. And I think it's a case where a case can definitely be made of Sting and Darby Allin are genuinely a case of two single stars that are just an excellent tag team, in the same way as a Kenny Omega Adam Page pairing, where them working within the tag ranks and working as a tag team, and working their way towards tag ranking and possibly a championship match actually makes some sense. And in the current situation, that would be a case of team mask versus team paint, and who can say no to that? That sounds fun.
That does.
I mean, right?
Now that you put it that way, it definitely does.
Although neither can lose their mask or paint, surely.
Oh, I do not mean in the sense of an Apuesta. No, no,
Okay.
no.
Yeah.
Just the
The
matchup.
Apuesta needs to be Young Bucks versus the hair versus
Oh,
mask. That
yeah,
I would
that
pay
would be
for.
great.
But paint versus mask, it's like no, neither side can lose. No
Absolutely.
way, don't buy it.
Yep.
But I just mean in terms of you've got the face paint team, you've got the mask team. There's a lot of things you can do with that. Just of the clash of cultures and all that.
Right.
And I really, this just has me buying them as a tag team. You know, qua tag team. This is a real, like, before this, I would say that they were just a partnership. You know, they're partners. I don't really think of them as a tag team. They'll sometimes have a tag team match because, you know, but yeah, there were some just such amazing spots in this. The one with the coffin drop. I mean, he used a coffin drop to the apron as a blocking move. That was to prevent a pin breakup.
Yep.
And that was the win, right? Oh,
Yep.
Such an amazing moment.
That really was.
I think that the big thing, though, other people probably have the criticism of, and you were going to bring this up, of does it make sense for these two singles guys to beat FTR, who are supposed to be the great tag team? And, you know,
that was going to be my next question.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. I can certainly understand it, you know, criticism of, like, why would you harm FTR's stock like that? It's just, you know, I don't think it harms their stock. I think they'll be fine. And I think that it was a show that needed a feel-good moment because, keep in mind, they were the only baby faces that won their match in the whole night, which is amazing that that's true, despite the fact that it was not a downer night at all. You know,
that's a really good point. I didn't even think about that.
And people will say, like, well, this is a show that respects baby faces. Is like that. There was only one baby face that won. They gave a lot of credit to the heels, and two heels won with submissions. I mean, that's something that you'd never see in a lot of companies. There are a lot of promotions where, you know, baby faces aren't allowed to tap out. That's considered weak. Like here, it's more realistic. There's, if you're in a submission hold, there's nothing else you can do.
Oh yeah, I absolutely agree. I feel like in AEW, the submission is not. It's not painted to be a humiliation when you tap out. You know, I think certain characters do it well. So Miro, or Miro and Eddie Kingston, right? Kingston has been presented as someone who is too tough to tap out, but that just, all it does is put over how gritty and how tough Kingston is, as opposed to how pathetic everyone else is for tapping out, right? And I think that is how a submission should be used. It's not a humiliating experience if someone taps out to it. The whole point is that it's supposed to be so painful that you do tap out. I think all it should do is serve to put over the specific people who are too tough to do it. So Kingston's one of them. Mox is one of them. And I think AEW does a great job of showing that. So it never, to me, and I think a lot of people share this feeling, it never makes a babyface look weaker to me if they tap out to a legitimate heel, like an MJF or like a Britt Baker, like we'll talk about in a second. But Gareth, because Sergi brought the point up, I want to give it to you for the last word on this. Do you feel like FTR should have won?
Just on the submission thing quickly, I think there were 3 submission finishes tonight to go along with that point. 2 of them obviously for heels. And yeah, it's great, and it's all about context. Like someone tapping when you've done nothing, you know, like just out of nowhere almost. As sometimes will happen in WWE, that can make you look weak or whatever. But the great thing about AEW is if there's going to be a submission finish, the match is always built to focus on that. But yeah, back on FTR. The idea as well, like people saying that Sting and Darby are like 2 singles guys, which, I mean, Sting's only wrestled in tag team stuff in AEW. Obviously, he's a singles legend. but in AEW he's only done that, and a lot of they have tagged together a fair amount at this point now, so they are an established team. Sergey used the word partnership, but now after this win, feels like they're a proper team. But
Yep.
it's not like they were thrown together just for this match. For example, when they beat Team Taz, it was kind of like that. So if it had happened back then, I'd probably see it a bit more. Whereas now, it obviously FTR are the more established team as a team,
Yep.
but it's still a team versus a team in my eyes. And as far as should they have won, it all really depends on what the plan is. Because if there's not a huge plan for them for the rest of the year, it's not a huge deal. And then when the rankings, sorry, when they reset next year, maybe they're a bit more hungry. Then they can use this kind of thing as a motivation, like losing to Santana and Ortiz, and then this match. It's something that can motivate them and then galvanize them moving forward. The fact as well, Spears has lost a couple of matches, a couple of grudge matches. MJF obviously beat Jericho a few times, and they had the big win in what do you call it, Blood and Guts.
Blood and Guts, yeah.
They showed a lot of, they took a lot of losses since. It's a thing where the Pinnacle can actually be rebuilt around this a bit. Them being like, hang on a minute, why have we been losing? Oh, well, we're not going to the ring with each other. We're not actually working as a faction, and that's how you actually get them working as a faction, and that's how you then establish them as that faction. Particularly with the Bucks have now lost the titles. Where I don't know exactly when it's going to happen, but Kenny is going to lose his title soonish. Whether that's Full Gear or whether they drag it all the way out to Revolution, I don't know. But so the Elite, the whole thing with the Elite there, and I think they're going to move into their own little world, their own little story, and then maybe that opens up a spot where the Pinnacle can then actually really take over. So them coming from this place of having lost a few, and then that being the motivation to be like, we need to sort our crap out, basically, that can be really good as well. So we might look back on this in 6 months and say, oh, that was actually... I mean, people will never look back on it and say that was a great thing that happened. But from a storytelling point of view, that might actually be the case, even though people probably won't end up acknowledging it because they never do. Same thing with Cody. Like, people never acknowledge that Cody beating Darby those few times actually made the time when he actually won feel even better. But like, yeah, it's one of those things. I think it ultimately depends. If the plan was for FTR to get a title shot of Full Gear, which a lot of people are hoping for, because FTR versus Lucha Brothers is a match that I think a lot of people want to see. If that ends up happening, then you'd be a bit like, okay, so they took 2 losses, but then they somehow become number 1 contenders, and maybe they go on like a 5-6 match winning streak, and then beat some top contenders between now and then. There is a good amount of time, but I don't see that now being the plan. Is basically what I'm saying. But that's also fine. There are other teams, there are other things to do, and it's okay. I just want to see them back on top soonish,
Right. But it doesn't hurt FTR. I think that's the ultimate of this, and I think that dictates how we should feel about any particular match, winner or loser. Does it hurt the loser? And I think long term for FTR, they can't get put into a tag title match tomorrow, but they wouldn't anyway, whether they had won this match or not. They wouldn't be put in a title match tomorrow. But you want to give them a couple matches where they win against established teams and then put them in a title match? Absolutely. And this match doesn't affect that at all for them because of who they are, the reputation they have, who they're with, being Tully Blanchard, and how good they are in the ring. All of that means that no matter what you do with them, they can always be presented as legitimate title contenders with just a little bit of work, just a few matches. And
like the Gun
they
Club.
deserve that. Right, like the Gun Club, exactly.
unlike, I understand from what Gareth was saying. It's like, that's a good point, is that the one reason why it's understandable that some people might be disappointed that FTR lost is that it seems to mean that they're not looking towards FTR versus Lucha Bros in the near future. It's like, I could see that being a disappointment to folks, but in a vacuum, it was a fantastic match, and the outcome was the perfect one for that story, regardless of what it means for future stories.
Yeah, absolutely agreed. We have finally come to the time where we are talking about the main event, of course, Britt Baker versus Ruby Soho for the Women's World Championship. This was, shock, it was a really good match. It was a lot of fun. I personally did not like it quite as much as Baker versus Statlander, but it was a great match nonetheless. Now, what is interesting about this, when we look at the numbers, is the fact that Britt Baker had 55% of the match offense. Now, this to me seems like the kind of match that you would want Ruby Soho to have a majority of the offense. You would want people to believe that she can beat Britt Baker. And I don't know, I guess in my opinion, there was no point during the match that I felt like Ruby was going to win this. And I think a big part of that was the Doctor continued to be, I don't want to say dominant, but continued to be ahead throughout the match. Now, that may be my own personal, my bias coming in about how I wanted Britt Baker to win, and I was very much rooting for Britt Baker. But I couldn't. What?
I said, how can you root for her? She's so awful.
I really like Britt Baker. I'm going to be honest. I really, really like. I love what she does. I love her promos. I love the charisma. Like I love everything about her, and I root for her to win.
No, don't get me wrong. She's fantastic, but in the exact same way that MJF is also fantastic at being awful.
You know, I don't know why, because I root for MJF to lose. Yeah, I want MJF to lose. I was rooting for Pillman. I can't really put my finger on why I want Britt Baker to win, but I want MJF to lose. I'm gonna have to think about that and get back to you on that.
But you know, the thing is, you're in the majority. There are a lot of people that want to cheer for her, despite the fact that she is very much the villain and doesn't seem at all interested in saying, "Oh well, people are cheering for me. I guess I have to be the good guy now." Like, yeah, whatever.
Maybe someone in the chat can help us out and try to help me put words to why I want Britt Baker to win, but I don't want MJF to win. I don't know. As far as this match is concerned, though, I think that this match did its job. It told a good story. Ruby did come off as a sympathetic babyface, which I think is what they were going for, and it was a match that I really did enjoy. So, Sergi, take us through this match. What did you like about it, and where do you think it stacks up among Britt's title defenses so far?
Comparisons are not my quality comparisons, I should say, are not something that I put a lot of stock in, or really am going to invest a lot of mental energy on. I was just like, it was great. It was fun. I'm not going to say if it was better or worse than any other match of Baker's or any other match in general. It was, there were some interesting things about it. First off, it was a main event of an incredibly important show. It's not the first main event that we've had in the women's division. It's not the first main event that Britt Baker specifically has had. The previous main event was also a Baker match. So that shows some of the trust that they have in her, both to carry her weight in terms of like being someone that they can rely on as a main event level person, and also as the representative of the women's division, of the person that when they're really putting a spotlight on the women's division, she's the one of the people there. Takes two to tango, but she's generally been one.
Right.
And the interesting thing is that we have a show that, although this was the main event, it was probably not the biggest attraction. But despite that, they gave it the main event slot for reasons that are, many reasons. The reasons that had as much to do with what they wanted to accomplish with Kenny Omega versus Danielson as about this match itself. But despite that, we've got a main event match, a match that is under the traditional terms of what defines a main event. It was the last match, and it was the last match, the main event match in traditional terms, of the third biggest Dynamite ever in terms of viewership, and that's really something important and a huge step forward for the women's division. That has been one thing that AEW has struggled with, is making that division what it should be in terms of parity, in terms of fairness, and in terms of just excitement. The other thing that's really interesting to me about this match is that it is, the things that I say in terms of their character. I definitely think that Britt Baker and MJF have a lot of similarities in terms of just being really excellent at getting under people's skin. But in terms of wrestling style, they're so very different. The MJF is extremely steady and methodical, and Britt Baker does not wrestle like that at all. If you look at the flow of offense, she is up and down. It's just so very, very different from MJF's match. And there is a lot that she does that is, that whole getting heat by stopping the baby faces thing. That she does that, but there's also a lot that she does that is just genuinely exciting and entertaining in its own right, in a way that a heel maybe doesn't normally do, but is different for Britt Baker, since she is this weird beloved heel character. That's what's going on here.
Right. I think one of the things that you see in the flow of offense graph is something that I often observe with Britt Baker, and it's one of the reasons why I really like her, because I think she wrestles in a different style, but one that I think is really effective. I don't think it would be effective for a lot of people to do it, but I think for her, because it's unique, and one of the things that really sets it apart is the fact that she has these different gears that she goes to, and it's so visible, especially in the flow of offense. So when you look at the way the match started, the babyface starts out hot like we would expect, but Britt is in first gear and shuts her down, and then in that 5-minute mark she goes into second gear, right, and that's when her offense really jumps up, and it's early in the match. So from a kayfabe perspective, I think she knows she's not going to end the match here, but she also knows that to use the lockjaw, you can't target a specific part of the body because there's so much going on. You have the arms, the back, the head and neck. So she knows that instead of just targeting specific points on the body, she just has to put a lot of pressure on, and she has to make you hurt, and that's what she does. And then she goes back into first gear, and then the Ruby comeback happens, and Britt sort of goes into this almost like a third gear where she's like coasting, but she tries to take those little opportunities, and you can see that from 8 to 10, Britt starts at like 7 offensive moves in the 8th minute, and then in the 9th minute she goes down to like 3, and then in the 10th minute I think she's gone down to 1, but it continues to be impactful. She tries to do those offensive maneuvers start to become bigger. They start to become fouls, or they become the stomp, or the fisherman's neck breaker, things like that. And then in the 11th minute, when she realizes, now is the time, that's when she goes into that 4th gear. And now she's pulling it all out. That's where those moves that she didn't hit before, where she's hitting the stomp on the stairs, or she's hitting the curb stomp in the ring, those types of things, that's when she starts doing them. And then in that last minute, you get that storytelling point where Ruby hits the, what are they calling it now? What used to be the riot kick. They had a name for it this time, and I forgot.
No idea.
They called it something, but whatever. She hits the kick. Baker's down, but then she has to hit it again on Rebel, and then she tries to hit it again on Hayter, and then the cheating happens, and that's when Britt gets the lockjaw. It's a different flow of match than we're used to seeing, and maybe that's why I root for Britt Baker to win, because physically she's not coming from behind, right? She's not doing the babyface comeback. She's allowing Ruby to do the babyface comeback. But I don't know, just tactically her matches are so interesting to me. And you know, I tried to come up with some reason. I still can't figure it out. I still can't figure out why I want Britt Baker to win. So you know, I'll sit back and think on that a little bit and try to come up with an explanation. But for right now, Gareth, this match seemed like a storytelling style match in the sense that they wanted to guide you through different points where you thought Ruby was going to win or Britt was going to win. It didn't necessarily work for me. I never at one point thought that Ruby was going to win this match. Am I alone in that? I mean, did you have points during this match where you thought Ruby might be the new champion coming out of this?
You're definitely not alone. I think I remember seeing like a few people online afterwards, because obviously the show ends, and then you go on Twitter to see what people are saying, and a few people were saying that it wasn't a great match, and I was like, I don't know, it was a very good match and stuff, but I can see why, like, because I didn't feel that she was Ruby Soho that it was going to win this at any point, and obviously I came in almost certain, even though if Soho had won, I don't think anyone would have been too angry. I think obviously some people would have been angry that Baker's title run was ended. But in terms of Soho, if this was in a few months' time, maybe I think maybe people would bite on those. And I can't even remember any particular near falls as the problem either. But maybe people would bite on whatever there was there a bit more just because I think people knew that Baker's title reign wasn't ending, and I think maybe they knew that people would know that as well. So maybe they went in a different route rather than trying to get you to bite on that. It was more about other things. One thing I really noticed in this match was that like Ruby Soho, I've when I mean we've got Sergey here, who's Mr. Stars Make Fights, and you know you've got some people who are strikers, some people who are brawlers, some people who are technicians or whatever, and I've come up with a term for Ruby Soho, and I don't know who else falls into this, but she's just like a scrapper. She's actually really small, and you know, because a lot of the women are quite small, I often don't really notice. But with when she was like coming up, Baker's quite a lot bigger than her, and she was just having to basically just find offense where she could, and that made her really endearing to me. Like someone like you know, it's kind of like the same thing with like Darby Allin, for example. Like he kind of just has to scrap and find bits. I don't think she quite went to that extreme because she wasn't quite as far behind at any point as Darby Allin. I was never like thinking that she was Ruby Soho was about to die, whereas Darby Allin sometimes I'm a bit worried. Um, but like, yeah, there was a lot of scrapping as well as that. There was a lot of reversals. If you look at the per hour rates, we can see that there's both women have more than 60. So both women are reversing more than once a minute. And you know, it's not just a couple over, it's quite significantly over that 60 mark.
Yeah.
Um, Between the two of them, it's 140. Um, so that was definitely helped with this feeling of kind of going back and forth within the story of the match, and that is how I felt. Even though there are periods where it's like, obviously you got that what was it, 3 to 5 minutes of Baker where she's very much ahead, and 6 to 10 Ruby is she's ahead consistently, but like not by a huge amount for some of it. And then those kind of 9, 9, 10 minutes, she is a bit more dominant, and then Britt gets a comeback as well. And then going into that last minute, then Ruby's very dominant, but Britt manages to get on that move just at the end. So you did have this kind of back and forth feeling throughout, which I think really helped as well. But
Yeah.
going to your thing of the whole Britt Baker, why do so many people root for her and stuff? And one of the things I think is like she does have similarities with MGF, but she's also got a lot of very stark differences. She will play up, but she herself and stuff. She's very arrogant, but she doesn't necessarily crap on the fans as much. She'll sometimes be a bit more snide and kind of joking with it, whereas MGF will flat out just scream in your face or whatever. And
Right.
there are definitely times where she does go at the crowd as well, like, but it's nowhere near to the extent. I think also Tony Schiavone, like, if he's on your side, I think people are just gonna naturally, because he's the biggest babyface in life. So I think if he's on your side, it's always gonna help. If they did really want to go on her being a heel, maybe this thing with Adam Cole ends with her having to like kick Tony Schiavone to the curb. I don't mean do a curb stomp on Tony Schiavone. Don't do that. But I don't think they should do that. I think it kind of just works, particularly in her matches and stuff. I always just feel like I always get a big fight feel to go with Michael Cole's favorite phrase from Britt Baker. She feels to me like this women's division's kind of like Rock or John Cena or something. Just like she doesn't necessarily have to be technically the best, but every time she's in there, I'm just kind of uh, I'm invested.
Right.
Regardless of whether I want her to win, for example, against Nyla Rose or whatever, where she was going up against someone who was a very established heel, or whether, maybe I'm supposed to want her to lose in a situation like this, even though I didn't really want her to lose, but I also wouldn't have been mad if she had, kind of thing. So,
Yeah,
but yeah,
that's fair.
and I think those points you made earlier about the way she wrestles really helps her do that. But yeah, I think that's basically the thing. She feels like so big time and like such a star that I think people just naturally gravitate towards that. And it was the same with The Rock back in the day.
Yeah.
Even though he was a heel, he was so entertaining that people just couldn't help but enjoy it. And so you don't boo what you enjoy, really, unless that's the entire point of your enjoyment with MJF.
You know, I think that's such a great comparison because I think she's very similar to The Rock in that they both just ooze charisma. Like when Britt Baker comes out there, I just feel like all eyes are on her, and you just everything she does, you're just like invested in it, and it's so like there should be like documentaries, like 2 hour long retrospectives done about Britt Baker's career in AEW when she finally retires or takes some time off or whatever she might want to do, because we have to remember that she came in as an anointed star. Like AEW presented her immediately as a huge star in the company, and people flat out rejected her as a babyface. And one of the things they said was she doesn't have charisma, right? She doesn't make us care. And now suddenly she comes back as a heel, and she has so much charisma that people now care about her so much as a heel you'd think she was a babyface. And it's like it's unbelievable the turnaround that she has created, not that just has happened around her, but that she actually created herself by understanding this character to the point that people went from not like treating her as a go away heel as a babyface to now treating her as the company's biggest babyface when she's supposed to be a heel. It's like it's amazing what she's been able to do, and if it's possible, I don't think people give her enough credit for how much she gets it. And when you talk about people with in-ring psychology, I think Britt Baker deserves to be on the level. Maybe this will be crazy, but I think Britt Baker deserves to be on the level of an MJF or even a Chris Jericho, of someone who just gets it. And I wish that people would talk about that more, because I think that's what needs to be said about Britt Baker as a character. So maybe that's why I like her. On some subconscious level, I appreciate so much what she's done that I want to root for her, because I understand, how hard she had to work to get there, and how I just appreciate how well she understands the activity that she is currently competing in. It's like, I guess like the same reason that you would like, say, a Conor McGregor or someone like that. You just appreciate the skill. You appreciate how good they are. At least he used to. I mean, I guess at his height, but yeah. I mean, you understand my point. I'm throwing things out there. I still haven't I haven't figured it out yet, but I'm just throwing possibilities out there.
And yeah, going back to The Rock as well. Don't want to keep comparing her to The Rock because it's just such a lofty kind of comparison. But he was the exact same. He came in, was anointed this star, had that Survivor Series performance. They tried to push him as Rocky Maivia, and fans were just like, nah, this is
Right.
crap. And he turned heel and became the coolest guy in the world, and everyone was like, yeah. And then eventually they end up turning him babyface, and it just, yeah. But like, it's funny. Like, obviously that happened over a much longer period of time and stuff, partially because, I mean, it's naturally Vince just isn't quite as on the pulse, I think. You know.
Well, and things
but-
also
Stubborn.
did. Yeah,
Well, yeah,
that's true.
exactly.
And things did take longer back then. There was.
True, sometimes, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, even like Stone Cold's main event push, people were ready for that way before it even happened.
Yeah.
But again, maybe that's stubbornness, maybe that's just a difference in culture and over time. I don't know. But either way, different conversation. Britt Baker is the Rock in the modern day. There you go.
In a lot of ways, for sure. But I want to go back to what you're saying about Ruby Soho, Gareth. I think you made a really good point. My way of phrasing it would be to say that Ruby Soho is a stick and move specialist. That's where her strengths are, is volume striking. On the one hand, you've got your volume striking, and then your avoidance, your counter wrestling. I think that people should keep in mind that for something to count as a counter, that includes ducks. That includes any avoidance of your opponent's offensive moves. So it's not just like countering out of a hold. It can also include your duck or your block. So she's great at that, and she's very much a striking specialist. So for her, a lot of that is going to be blocks and ducks. It's just a very very small, scrappy boxer kind of a feel that she gives, and it is a really great move set for a babyface, which it boggles me that she's hasn't spent much time as one until now. It's the perfect role for her in my view, both for her look, which is really really good, in terms of it just like a CM Punk, or like anybody that has that kind of a Punk look, that's very effective in terms of really connecting with people and being sort of exciting, and her fighting style, and it really works in terms of getting a positive reaction from the fans. And I don't think that the fact that she wasn't in any position to overturn Baker isn't going to be the end for her. She's going to be doing other things.
Oh, absolutely. And I think, going back to something that I've always said about the women's division, is a big reason why they've had so many issues is because AEW booking is very much, they're reliant on using current stars to make newer stars. If you look at AEW as a company in its history, we always talk about how well they build newer guys. But if you really look at it, one of the ways that they do that is they take the older guys and they use them not just to hand wins to newer guys, but they use them to put over the newer stars. And so when you look at in the male ranks, Cody helped do that for Darby. Jericho helped do that for Moxley, who didn't necessarily need that, but Jericho took Moxley from being a hot free agent to making him, according to PWI, the best wrestler in the world, right? And Jericho helped do that. And then Moxley helped do that to Kingston. And then Kingston helped do that in some form and fashion to the Lucha Brothers, who also got help from the Young Bucks, right? I mean, on the male side, they are so good at doing that, and it's what makes these guys become bigger stars. And MJF and Jungle Boy, I could go on and on, but the newer stars they create are because of older stars. The reason the women's division has not worked out the same way as the men has is because AEW did not have the Jericho, Cody Rhodes, Kenny Omega, Young Buck level stars on the women's side to help do that for the next generation. Well, now suddenly they're coming into some. Britt Baker has made herself that level of star. Ruby Soho, the way the fans react to her, is that level of star. Thunder Rosa is that level of star. So now I think AEW can settle into the kind of booking that they know, which is let's make newer stars using these established these established women, whether they were established before they got to AEW or in the case of Britt Baker, established while she was in AEW. And I think that for that reason, you know, I don't like always talking about, oh, is this the turnaround point for the AEW women's division or whatever, because we talk about it all the time, and I think it's tired in a lot of ways because that stuff doesn't happen overnight. But what it does show you is that Ruby Soho, I don't need her to be around the title right now, because what I would like her to do is start building newer stars that will down the road be champions someday. You know, whether it's Statlander or Red Velvet or Jade Cargill or, you know, whoever. I mean, those are just the three that come to mind, but there's lots of others. Layla Hirsch you could put in there. There's lots of others that could be in that position. Maybe Soho wants to have a longer term feud with like a Jamie Hayter. I would love to see that. I mean, I know they already did a singles match, but I would love to see them explore that a little bit more from a storytelling perspective. So I think that, you know, getting away from, oh, is this the turnaround point from the women's division? I'm not going to tackle that question. I think what this is confirmation that AEW can now, on the women's division, focus on the kind of booking that they are really successful with and use that to increase the longer term health of the women's division in terms of how many stars do they have to offer.
That's a great point, and I think that it segues nicely into talking about a key piece that they're bringing into the women's division that should help a lot. That being the TBS title. You know, if you've heard anything about that, should be really exciting for allowing having something for a secondary feud beyond whatever Britt Baker's doing at any given time, something to be about, and that I'm really looking forward to that.
Yeah, I mean, it's not really a plug because this was months ago, but I wrote on the PWM website about why they needed to integrate one of these, not immediately, but soonish, because the division's starting to be there to not demand it, but the availability is there, and they do it for the men, so why not the women? And you made a great point there, Griff, of how they elevate stars as in those kind of things. And when we had the NWA title and Serena Deeb was kind of doing that, Ty Conti, that's where she first started looking really good. Anna Jay had a best match, which is, you know, something great considering just a couple months before that she had a really great match, which I think was only her sixth ever match with, I think it was Shida. And so, like, but yeah, Deeb was basically taking a few people. I think there was Red Velvet was another one. And then obviously the Riho, who's kind of an established star as well as a former champion. But that match was just, it's undeniably top 3 women's matches in AEW history, the one with Riho. So that was, you know, such a great run that she had with the NWA title. And that kind of just showed to me that, like, oh, they are ready to do something like that, especially now that you got Thunder Rosa's fully signed. Ruby Soho is here now as well. Jamie Hayter as well. Like, they've added names as well, and Hayter's already super over, is really talented, and offers something different in that powerhouse style. Obviously, you've got Jay Cargo who's there, but she's nowhere near as experienced. She can't carry a match like someone like Hayter could. And then you got Nyla Rose, but she's very hit or miss. And then you've got Statlander, but she's a babyface. So Hayter offers something completely different. And the division's just shaping up now. And like you said, this stuff was never going to happen overnight. And I still think, you know, sometimes they've shown not enough care or interest. And even still now, like, unless it's Baker, like, we often see just a quality of booking that isn't quite in the same as the men's. But it's definitely something which is improving, and this is another example of something where you can say over the last few months we've been like checking things off, and this is just another step forward, I think. And coming into the new year with that new title, I think it's gonna keep improving, and pretty soon I think I have faith and confidence that we'll be saying undeniably this is the best women's division outside of Japan, basically. So that is exciting to actually have the faith that that's going to happen again.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. The talent is undeniably there as well, like we've been saying. I think for me, this has always been the case. I don't particularly care if you want to go the New Japan route and say we're just not going to have women's wrestling. You know, like, well, if AEW wanted to say we have this partnership with Impact, uh, we'll have maybe Impact matches on our shows. You know, we'll go with the Knockouts division, and that will be the pinnacle of women's wrestling. If they want to do that, that you can do whatever you want. I don't really care. My issue was I don't want it to be half-assed. If you're going to have women's wrestling, make it the quality of the men's wrestling. You know, give me the kind of stories that you're giving me in the men's division if you're going to have it. And I think AEW is at that point, certainly with Britt Baker, that when she's on TV, I like it just as much as when any of the men are on TV. And that's really all I want. You know, if you're going to give it to me, do it right. And I feel like AEW is doing it right. So now it's just a matter of, if you want to add more stuff, make sure that it's at that quality. And I think there are women in AEW that have that level of quality, not necessarily on the exact same level as Britt Baker, because as we said, Britt Baker is the modern version of The Rock. So you're not gonna get that level necessarily. But in terms of, I love seeing Chris Statlander. You know, I would love to see her featured more. I really like Jade Cargill. I would like to see her featured more. They brought in Kiera Hogan, and I think she has a lot to offer as well. Jamie Hayter, Ty Conti, who I'm a huge fan of, Anna Jay. Like, you got lots of women that I really enjoy seeing. So, you know, just put them in a position where they're going to do things that I like. I think that's, wrestling booking doesn't have to be any more complicated than that. You know, just put your best wrestlers in positions that people like seeing them in. And it seems like with the men, obviously AEW's been doing that basically since they started. Now it seems like with the women, because it now matches closer to their booking philosophy, we're now getting closer to the point where if women's wrestling is on TV, it is high quality, and the stories they're telling are good quality as well. Speaking of, I keep using the speaking of transition, but you know what? Once we've been going for like 3 hours, that's you can't expect me to have my transitions exactly on point. But yes, we have been going for almost 3 hours talking about AEW Grand Slam. It was a fantastic show. I think we can all agree. So I just have one more question for you guys before we wrap it up here, and that is this your favorite AEW show? And I'm talking TV and pay-per-view. Is this your favorite one that you've seen in AEW's history so far? I know I'm putting that on you. I'm kind of putting you on the spot. So let's go with Gareth first. I got to do it to you, Gareth. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's an interesting question because it's like, I don't know how. Obviously, it's kind of incomparable to a normal episode of TV because it's kind of built like a pay-per-view, but then it's kind of incomparable to a pay-per-view because they're a lot longer and stuff. Mm-hmm. But obviously, taking everything as for what they were going in, it's certainly one which has met my expectations or exceeded them even as much as any other. It's got my favorite singles match on it, I think, from AEW in terms of at least what I think is the best. I think there are other ones which I like more for sentimental value or whatever, but yeah, in terms of being the best or whatever, I think that was it. I'll say it's up there. I think I enjoyed All Out more overall, even though QT Marshall's on it. Yeah, that was fine. No, like, I think I did enjoy that more, even though the singles matches didn't hit the heights, but then you did have that amazing Young Bucks versus Lucha Brothers match as well, so it kind of leveled out ultimately in that sense. But CM Punk's first match, just seeing that, and then the debuts of Bryan and Adam Cole was such a great, exciting moment. Whereas tonight, as much as we got the amazing, mind-blowing match of Bryan Danielson and AEW versus Kenny Omega, we didn't get the moments as such, and I like to have those as well. So it's definitely up there, but I'd still say All Out was my favorite, and maybe like Revolution 2020 as well, a little bit above, because that was so great. But it's up there.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
As soon as he threw in Revolution 2020, I was like, okay, well, I could just say ditto. Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely not one to put too much stock in comparing how good things are.
Right.
I came out of the show happy and satisfied with my evening of Dynamite, which isn't even unusual. Um, uh, some of the things in this show were special and above and beyond even what you expect from AEW. But yes, All Out and Revolution 2020. I mean, definitely, if you're just comparing, those are still the ones that I would say are my favorites ever.
Yep.
And the Arthur Ashe show isn't overturning that necessarily, but it didn't need to. It was an amazing show, and saying that I wouldn't necessarily list it as my very very favorite AEW show ever. Doesn't necessarily take anything away from it because they've just put on so many great shows. It's tough to compare.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I totally agree, and I will echo the two of you. All Out and Revolution 2020 are definitely my two favorites. This, though, might be my favorite televised event that AEW has ever done. I think this does rank above Winter is Coming, but Winter is Coming has the best moment that they've ever put on TV. I think match quality wise, this will rank above that, mostly because of Danielson and Omega. As much as I liked Omega Moxley, Danielson Omega was on a different level. But the moment of Sting debuting is still maybe the best moment that AEW has ever created. And I don't count the Brody Lee tribute show. I think that exists sort of in a different in a different lane. But yeah, look, I ask it just because I wanted people to see, if they haven't already watched the Arthur Ashe show, which, by the way, if you haven't, first of all, I'm shocked you made it this far in, and second of all, what the hell are you doing? Like, go watch it. But I just want people to know, I think for those of us who have watched, I know for me, tell me if I'm wrong, but I think all of us have watched everything that AEW has put on TV since they started, every pay-per-view since they started. So we are as experienced AEW fans as you can find, and we all agree that this is in the very, very upper echelon of what AEW has done in terms of show quality. And I think that just goes to show you that that's what AEW wanted to do with this Arthur Ashe show. They wanted to make a statement. They put it in front of 20,000 fans. They're in New York. They wanted to make that statement, and they did. And I think the ultimate takeaway that anyone should have from this show is there were so many expectations. They sold 20,000 tickets. There was just a belief that this was going to be one of AEW's best shows, and it should not be ignored that it is very hard to hit expectations like that, especially in today's day and age where people are so jaded on social media and they're so negative. It's very hard to hit expectations like this, and I think AEW did that. It didn't have to be your favorite show ever, but it had to be one of those shows that you remember. And I think this was. I think this was a show that I will remember for a long time. I think a lot of people will remember this show for a long time, and that was their goal starting out.
Absolutely. And, the thing about that is that they have proven how, as far as ticket sales, of every bit of trust that their fans have in them, that if they are trying to sell a lot of tickets, they don't have to announce anything in particular. You can trust that they're going to deliver on, anytime that they've had a really big show, it's been amazing.
Yeah.
And I think it's also worth noting that we haven't seen it all yet, and that those that were there live in the building, many of them are saying, just wait, Friday's even better. Friday's going to be even better.
I have
even
heard
though
that.
It won't be live. Yeah.
I have heard that, and I'm really curious to see, because I just wonder, I felt like the fans, after the first 45 minutes, it felt like the fans were, I don't want to say burnt out, because they weren't, but it felt like they were tired just from seeing those first two things. So I'm like, God, by the fourth hour, like, are they going to be able to come with that energy? And certainly, like you said, Sergi, from what we've heard, it sounds like they did. So I can't wait to see it. I've heard that the Adam Cole pop is on like a legendary pop level for Rampage. That's what I've heard. So I'm really excited to see if that comes true. So, like we keep saying, we will have one of those fans in attendance on the podcast. Hopefully on Saturday, possibly on Sunday. We're still nailing that down, but it will be right here on YouTube. So we will have that scheduled once we get a time. Make sure you join us so you can ask him all of the questions that you had for someone who was in attendance, and just live vicariously through someone who was there and got to experience that live. So make sure you subscribe on YouTube so that you can catch that when it goes down. Give us a 5-star review on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, wherever you are. Make sure you can hear that one. And we will also be updating you on the status of that. So with that, Gareth, please tell the people where they can find you. Oh, what a great time for the dog to make an appearance. Wow.
I think he wants his food. You can find me on Twitter at RHWGareth. And over on Pro Wrestling Musings, where I do the I was going to say Stars Make Fights. That's not me. I wish it was me.
Let's talk about gimmick infringement.
No,
He's about to take credit for that.
The Tale of the Tape series, where I break down the stats and the stories behind certain matches, or I did a promo one time, or I'm going to do the Young Bucks' entire tag team title reign. Partially way through that. I'm just making my way through all the matches. So that's coming. And then I think probably have to go and do Bryan versus Omega, just because,
I think you might have to.
I want to do quite a few of these matches, but I don't know if I'm going to get time. But I might have to just do that one. So those are the things you can look for on Pro Wrestling Musings in terms of from me that's coming up as well.
All right.
So, yeah.
ProWrestlingMusings.com to
Really
check all
looking
that
forward
out.
to that.
Absolutely. Sergi, we've sorted out the situation of Gareth trying to steal your gimmick here. So if you would please tell the people where they can find you.
Tale of the Tape, Styles Make Fights. They're both based on cliches by the commentary team. If you haven't checked out Tale of the Tape, there's so much good stuff. Especially, I'm gonna shout out one of my favorite things ever on Pro Wrestling Musings is the Tale of the Tape of CM Punk's debut match. Fantastic analysis in that. For me, I'm sure that there'll be a link to my Twitter. That's where you find me. I make the Styles Make Fights, that series of columns. If you go to ProWrestlingMusings.com, it has its own tab. It's great. You just click on the tab and you'll see all of my writings on taking a look at the offense mix of the different competitors and analyzing what that means for upcoming matches, the past week's matches, and looking at that and analyzing that. And I really enjoy it. The one thing that is missing from Styles Make Fights is greater discourse. If you read it, please. I get the occasional thing from other people who write for Pro Wrestling Musings about hey, that's a great column, but I just everybody who reads that, the dozen of you, thank you to begin with. Just reach out to me. Just if anything is confusing, ask a question, or if just anything strikes a thought in you, just would love more back and forth. It feels like shouting into the void without any feedback, and I'd love to get more. But just really, it's a something I really enjoy making, even if nobody read it. But yeah, Styles Make Fights. That's where you find me, or on Twitter, and that's where you could interact with me. Feel free.
Yeah, and absolutely do that. I love Styles Make Fights. I read it every week. and also the Styles Make Fights dashboard. I say it. Sergi hasn't been on in a couple weeks, so it'll give me time to say it again. That's just something I'll go on when I'm bored and just look through, and you can see there's so much stuff you can do with that tool. It's well worth your time to look at. I have been Griff from GA. Check me out on my personal YouTube channel, General Admission Wrestling. And if while you're there, if you're not already, subscribe to our YouTube page at Pro Wrestling Musings. There's always cool stuff happening. And hopefully we can do more of these live podcasts so you can interact with us, ask us questions about the numbers, or just give your own thoughts. I love seeing the thoughts of other people who maybe are not as tied up in AEW as we are, and so we can really get a different perspective on all of these things that we talk about. Once again, gotta plug it. We will have a fan who was in attendance at Grand Slam for all 4 hours. We will have him live. Follow us on Twitter at PW Musings for updates on that, and of course subscribe on YouTube so that when it goes live you will know about it and you can ask him all of your questions about being at Grand Slam Live. Thank you all so much again for joining us. Hope you enjoyed Grand Slam. Hope you enjoy Rampage Grand Slam on Friday. And once again, just make sure you subscribe so you can ask us all the questions